Thank you. Good morning, everybody. We're going to go ahead and get the meeting started. If I can have Ms. Davis please call the roll.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Chairman Vasquez.
Present.
Vice Chairman Schaefer.
Present.
Member Gaines.
Present.
Deputy Controller Stowers.
Here.
A quorum, I think she called everybody, right? Because I felt a little muffled there. Did they call you, Ms. Cohen? Member Cohen? Okay. So that everybody here, we got everybody present. We will go ahead and start with the Pledge of Allegiance. If I just get you to stand, we'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, for liberty and justice for all. With that, members, before we get started, I was asked by a member to wanted to give some opening remarks in light of everything that's happening today. So I'm going to go ahead and open it up to each member if they choose to give some opening remarks. And I'll start with Member Ted Gaines.
Yeah, thank you so much, Chairman Vasquez. I appreciate this opportunity. I just wanted to take this moment before we address our business of the day with regard to the challenges that exist and the great discord that is occurring across the nation and in California, where fault lines between us seem to be widening with astonishing speed, and where our grievances appear overwhelming and solutions look far off in the distance, clouded by the smoke of fires burning in our cities and buried beneath the rubble and shattered glass littering our streets. These are troubled times, and they show a desperate need for greater unity, for people to come together around all that we have in common as Americans. What we share towers over our differences. I want to commend my fellow board members for their commitment to working together and for exercising the principles of fellowship and unity that hold the key to a better tomorrow. And I pray for peace for the American future. Thank you.
Thank you. Member Cohen, I understand you wanted to give some opening remarks as well.
Yes, thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. It's nice to see you all this morning, somewhat in person. So I just wanted to take a few moments to share briefly with you and as my colleagues. I want to also share with our agency executive team, the entire Board of Equalization staff, the attendees on the call, my sentiments and thoughts about the unfortunate murder of George by the police officer who was sworn to protect and serve him. Member Gaines, I appreciate your words and your prayer, and I join you in that prayer. I'm sure all of our hearts were broken when we actually viewed the video. I don't know about you, but I have resisted watching the full length of the video of the officer kneeling on George Floyd's neck. However, have seen still shots and have seen and consumed enough news to know, well, what's going on in the world. The brutal image caught on a cell phone tells really only part of the story. The other part of the story is the urgent need to address the underlying issues that has brought us to this moment. And I just want to acknowledge that many of you say this, and I'll say it again for the record, as the first African-American woman to serve on the Board of Equalization in 142-year history. I feel a certain responsibility and privilege to state on the record that we must begin to address oppression and systemic racism, police brutality, and injustices experienced by African Americans every day. Moreover, all people that are feeling injustices coming from various communities, whether it's the LGBT community, Latino, Native American, Asian community. I believe that it's our collective responsibility to, whether national, state, or on a local level, for us no longer to be silent and take the necessary steps to unpack and address over 400 years of inequality and injustices. Many of us are in leadership roles in our everyday lives, in our families, in our religious communities, and you may be asking yourself, as have I, quite honestly, what role do we begin to play in this? So I first encourage all of us to search our hearts and our minds and our own individual perceptions of the African American community. We're always remembering we are all human and we deserve the same rights and liberties and justice under the law. I trust many of you agree with me. But it's our moral responsibility as Americans to work to make our country better and to bind up the wounds that have torn us apart. This problem is complex. There are lots of solutions. However, I think and I believe that if we collectively band together, ensure that we stand united and acknowledging the fact that Black lives do matter. Mr. Chair, I appreciate this time. I just want to close with remembering the words of Dr. Martin Luther King. I think Dr. is probably one of the most highly quoted, noteworthy, and noble African-American men that we constantly invoke his words and his wisdom during difficult times. And today I want to share with you, quote, "Justice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere," and that we are caught in an inextricable network of mutuality tied into a single garment of destiny. And whatever affects one directly affects all. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly. So with these words of Dr. King, let us move forward with love in our heart and justice in our mind as we continue to work together for a common destiny. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I turn the floor back to you.
Thank you. Vice Chair Schaefer, you care to have any opening remarks?
Yes, thank you, Chair. You know, Minnesota is over 1,000 miles away from all of us, but really, in another sense, it's right next door. Last week, I applauded Minnesota Attorney General Keith Ellison's decision increasing the criminal charges for former police officer Derek Chauvin to second-degree murder. 3 other officers involved in aiding and abetting the murder of George Floyd. Holding public guardians of law accountable for their actions and supporting the peaceful outrage over the unconscionable circumstances surrounding George Floyd's death are fundamental to leading meaningful action for change and justice in our state and in our country. I spent years of my life as assistant city prosecutor in San Diego, so I'm intimately involved with crime and that people should pay for. I condemn the destruction of public property and private property, and the Board of Equalization stands ready to do everything in our power to ensure that businesses and property owners affected by civil unrest receive timely support and relief to recover any damages suffered and to see reduced valuations that will mean reduced taxes, reflecting the realities of the situation. Fairness and equity are the core of the State Board of Equalization's mandate, and I have an abiding belief that all Americans have a right to be treated equally with dignity and respect by their government and by its representatives. My son Derek, who's used to run the Coachella Music Festival in April, it didn't happen this year because nobody's going to concerts, and he's now on unemployment and unable to go out at night, and his neighborhood right off Melrose has seen stores nearby looted and has to turn off their lights at night and wait for the sun to rise the next morning. We can't be living like this. Nobody should. So I applaud every government official who is speaking out on this, and I applaud members of my board for the stance they're taking, and I join with them. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Towers, do you care to say anything? Opening remarks?
Good morning. Thank you all. Member Gaines, I accept and receive that prayer. Member Schaefer, I accept and understand your comments, and I appreciate them. Member Cohen, my sister, I feel your pain, and I reflect on what we're going through, and I think about what Controller Yee asked me on a personal level on what I would see as justice in today. And I opened up and I shared it a lot, and I'm sure many of us who are minorities on this board have experienced injustice. But I say this, yes, the lottery is not acceptable, but as a Black woman with a Black male nephew, he has injustice each and every day when he steps out on the streets. When he leaves our home, my sister is worried, is he gonna come back safe, or will we get a call just because of the way he look? So I'm hurting, and many Black Americans, all Black Americans are hurting. And I'm so happy that as a nation, everyone has opened their eyes and see the injustice that we have been experiencing for over 400 years. Thank you for this time.
Thank you. And I would just like to echo all the comments that were made, and I'm in solidarity with all the statements that were made. And I really appreciate the fact that all of us are speaking out, and I know in our own ways, in our respective communities, are participating in many of these dialogues that are going to take place and have already taken place to try to correct these wrongs. You know, I remember as a kid, as a teenager, experiencing the Watts riots back in '68, and it seems like it happens in these cycles of every 20 to 25 years. And then we had the Rodney King situation, and here we are again. And I keep telling folks, especially, you know, I have two young adults, children. I say children, but they're young adults. And now they have been blessed because I've somewhat sheltered them. But in some respects, I'm not sure that's a good thing, because now that they see what's going on in terms of all these injustices, they're asking these hard questions about institutionalized racism, which exists. And in many cases and in different communities, it comes in different forms. You know, sometimes it's very subtle and sometimes it's very blatant. And I'm trying to walk them through that, and hopefully moving forward, we're going to be able to come up with hopefully some good resolutions to change those wrongs and put us on a path where we can begin to really look at each other as human beings and not have these stereotypes that everybody has or that have been raised with them over the years. I see a hand, or is that just, no, okay. So with that, let me go ahead and just remind everybody again, especially those that are listening in, that we have several speakers that I know are interested in speaking on many of these issues that we're going to discuss in a few minutes here on the agenda. But before we get started, I just want to remind, the board members, that we have many invited guests, and we're all simultaneously on the same line. So just be cognizant of that. And also, as we speak, especially for the public, I just want to remind them that this is really, we're hoping this is going to be really more of a discussion among the members, because, you know, last meeting we had an opportunity to hear a lot of your thoughts from the different groups and individuals on these topics that we're going to get into today. And I just want to remind folks that to be a little bit respectful, and if I end up, especially on some of these topics, I think we have quite a bit of speakers, if I have to limit you to 2 minutes, that you're not offended by it, because I want to really give the opportunity to the members, our members, to have a full discussion and come up with maybe some resolutions or maybe not. We may opt to just table some of these items or move them into, like I said last meeting, into the next level, which would be the second tier or the midterm goals, and some of these might be kicked into the long-term goals, and that's okay. We don't have to have a full consensus today, but on those things that we do, hopefully we'll come up with some action items to move those forward. And with that, let me have Ms. Davis, please, if she could just announce the first order of business.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Our first order of business is an announcement from Acting Chief of Board Proceedings, Henry Nanjo, regarding public teleconference participation. Mr. Nanjo.
Thank you, Ms. Davis. Good morning to the individuals who have joined the Board of Equalization for today's meeting via teleconference. Throughout the duration of today's meeting, you will be primarily in a listen-only mode. As you may know from our public agenda notice and our website, we have requested that individuals who wish to make a public comment fill out a public comment submission form found on our additional information web page, which can also be found at www.boe.ca.gov. If a public comment request has been received by our board proceeding staff on a specific item after the presentation of the item has concluded, your name will be called and the operator will provide directions for you to identify yourself. Additionally, if you have not already filled out a public comment form, the operator will provide instructions after the presentation of each on how to make a public comment. The operator will identify your line and unmute you so that you can make your public comment. We ask that the person whose name is called give the public comment at that time and limit their comment to 2 minutes, as stated by the chairman. Additionally, if you intend to make a public comment, we recommend dialing on the teleconference line, as the audio broadcast web experiences a 1 to 3 minute delay. We also ask everyone who is not intending to make public comment, please.
Did we lose him?
Henry, are you there still?
Did you lose me?
Yes, I lost you, and then you were coming back kind of faint.
Okay.
Now I can hear you.
Let me try. Okay, let me try that again. I'm going to go back a little bit just so we're clear. If a public comment request has been received by our board proceeding staff on a specific item, after the presentation of the item has concluded, your name will be called, and the operator will provide directions for you to identify yourself. Additionally, if you have not already filled out a public comment form, the operator will provide instructions after the presentation of each item on how to make a public comment. The operator will identify your line and unmute you so that you can make your comment. We ask that the person whose name is called give their public comment at that time and limit their comment to 2 minutes as stated by the chairman. Additionally, if you intend to make a public comment, we recommend dialing into the meeting on the teleconference line, as the audio broadcast on our website experiences an approximately 1 to 3 minute delay. We ask everyone who is not intending to make a public comment, please mute their line if possible, and if not, minimize your background noise. If there are technical difficulties while we are in the public comment portion of our meeting, we will do our best to read the submitted comments into the record at the appropriate times. Thank you for your patience and understanding. Thank you very much, Chairman Vasquez. Back to you.
Thank you. Once again, members.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question. This is more a process question about the presenters. Since
Sure.
you said we have many of them. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. Are the presenters going to be presenting new information, or are they going to be sharing with us what we heard on the call 2 weeks ago?
Good question. I'm going to try to push them to hold back and reserve themselves from repeating what we heard already, because I want us to really have a little bit more opportunity to discuss the issues. So I'll ask them as they speak, if they have anything new to add, please, by all means, share that with us. But if I don't think we need, unless I'm wrong, I don't think we need to hear the same presentations we heard last meeting.
Yeah, I actually am in agreement with you. Also, in that same vein, are the members of our executive staff going to be able to make presentations or address some of the agenda items as well?
It's open, and
Okay.
matter of fact,
Okay.
I'm hoping the members, if you have some clarifications or you have questions, by all means, feel free to ask the executive board or the executive members.
May I suggest something just for us for you to consider?
Sure.
Perhaps going in this the same format that we did before, where we had the scheduled presenters present, where we have executive BOE staff present, and then we took public comment, just as an order, just as in terms of process to help us through the lengthy agenda.
Well, along those lines, what I was hoping we could do is just go through the items, right, the workshops, and really allow ourselves to really engage a little bit more in it. And if, especially the speakers that are listed to speak, I'm going to ask them if they have anything, especially those that are representing groups or representing, I should say, taxpayers or larger groups, if they have anything new to share, to feel free to do it. But I'm going to try to hold back from allowing those folks to just give us that same, if it's a PowerPoint or another presentation on what we heard last meeting. I don't think we need to repeat it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay?
Thank you.
Thank you. But once again, members, good morning again. And I just wanted to thank the members of the public who have joined us today and are waiting on the line to participate in this public policy hearing. Today is the opportunity for the board members to fully engage on this COVID-19 workgroup issues identified in the task force report, as shown on this agenda. Our meeting today is scheduled to go until 4 p.m., which is about 6 hours. As I mentioned on the May 13th, the positions and recommendations on each of these 5 issues that are listed in the agenda are those of the participants only. And the options at the end of each issue are merely a few possible actions the board could take, but are not a complete list and are not intended to limit our choices. Ms. Davis, we're going to take our working groups a bit out of order. Please call our working group and instead of doing the order that we had from 1 to 5, I was going to ask that if we can push number 1 to 5 and then go into the order starting with group number 2, because I believe 1, specifically the May 7th deadline, obviously is passed, and we were able to get some action, an executive order by the governor, and I don't think there's a need to push that up to the front, at least now. But there is other deadlines that I think we should discuss, and I think those will be a little bit lengthier discussions. So I'd rather put that at the back end so we can dive a little bit deeper into those issues as a whole. So with that, I'm going to ask Ms. Davis to please call our first item.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We are going to call Work Group 2, Assessment Appeals Relief, RTC.
Thank you. We will begin with work group number 2, issue 1. Should the 2-year statute of limitations deadline to hear appeals for assessment appeal boards be extended? We will have 4 options for consideration in this matter. Option 1, issue an LTA extending the 2-year deadline for AABs by 40 days under section 155. BOE has issued a CAO 2020/009 on March 16th addressing this issue. Option 2, issue an LTA encouraging AABs to request taxpayers to submit waivers due to COVID-19 with a time certain beyond 40 days for a hearing. Option 3, requests an executive order for AABs to selectively postpone taxpayer appeals beyond 2 years. And then option 4, do nothing and maintain the status quo. Our speakers today on this issue are listed in the public agenda. And we have first John McKibben from the California Association of Clerks and Elected Officials, who will speak on the proposed executive order in option 3 of issue 1, and Member Gaines, who will provide an overview of Assembly Bill 3373. Member Gaines, since you are a designated speaker on this issue, would you like to take the lead in starting the discussion?
Yes, I would. Yeah, thank you, Chair. Assembly Bill 3373 authorizes County Board of Supervisors to create as many assessment appeals boards as is necessary to timely process, hear, and dispose of property tax appeals. Now, if you look at the 58 counties in the state of California, there are really probably 3 counties and probably some of the larger counties that are in need of this. In particular, LA County, Orange County, Riverside, and some of the other larger counties perhaps in the future could benefit from this. The ability to expand the number of assessment appeal boards in their counties. And currently the cap is at 5, and that simply isn't enough given the challenges that are before us with COVID-19. And then we still are not certain as to what's going to happen until the election on the split roll initiative. But if the split roll initiative passes, clearly there would be a surge of appeals on property values that would create a huge backlog. So I'm in support of this legislation, and I think it would be provide some great assistance to our larger counties. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Gaines. Mr. McKibben, are you online?
Yes, I am.
Oh, wait, is there a question?
Yes.
Ms. Stowes?
Ms. Stowes speaking. I understand we just talked about AB 3373.
Yes.
Mr. Gaines, do you know, is it still, which house is the bill in? Is it moving? Do you know the status of the bill?
It's on consent, so it's my understanding that it moved through the Assembly. I think it was a 75-0 vote in the Assembly. It's now on the Senate side.
Do you think it'd be beneficial for us to support the bill?
Absolutely.
Well,
Sure.
I will move unless you want to move board support.
Why don't you make the motion and I'll second?
I move that the board support AB 3373.
And I'll second that. Thank you.
So it's been moved in second. Members, do we need to hear from the public, or do you want to go ahead and just take action on this one?
I'm happy to hear from the public on it.
Okay. So can we just hold on the vote then? We have a motion on the floor, and it's been second, and we'll go ahead and start with Mr. McKibben. Are you on the line?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I am.
Go ahead. You have the floor.
Oh, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Members, John McKibben on behalf of the California Association of Clerks and Election Officials. Quick question, are we speaking at the moment only with regard to AB 3373 or the overall Team 2 issues?
Why don't we stay on AB 3373, and then once we have the vote, then we'll open it up to the other options we have.
Okay, happy to do that.
Thank you.
Yep, the California Association of Clerks and Election Officials are co-sponsors of the bill. We are the administrators of the assessment appeals boards, of course. We strongly support the bill. There has been a cap on the number of appeals boards that can be created for many, many years, and we've never been able to figure out why. It dates back to the original legislation in 1962 to create assessment appeals boards. We suspect that it was only there because at that time in California, no one had any experience whatsoever with assessment appeals boards. So we're assuming that somebody in the legislature decided they'd better play it conservatively and not let counties run wild and create dozens of assessment appeals boards for no purpose. That did not happen, would not happen. there's no reason why a board of supervisors shouldn't be able to make a determination based on what's happening in that county as to whether or not, as to how many assessment appeals boards they need to deal with the workload. Senator Gaines is quite correct. It only immediately affects Los Angeles, Orange, and Riverside County, but he's also correct that it's going to impact, with the surge of appeals as a result of COVID-19, it may force some other counties that are not yet up to the cap to exceed the cap. And certainly if split roll happens, many counties, and the larger counties, of course, are going to go to 5 boards or more. So we appreciate your support on this bill. We expect it to move forward without a hitch in the legislature and be signed by the governor, but having your board on board in support of the bill will certainly help that effort.
Thank you. Ms. Davis, is there any way of telling those members that are waiting on from the public to speak whether they're looking to speak on AB 3373? I'd like to get those up first, and then we can take action on this motion, and then we'll open it up to other options we have under Group 2. Are we able to do that, Ms. Davis?
Let me check, Mr. Chairman. I know we have some notes on the speakers, but I'm not sure if we have that detailed. If you can give me one moment, I will double check.
Sure, thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We do not have a way of finding that information out. We did not go into great detail. So if you'd like, at this time, we can ask the moderator if they would like to give direction for anyone who would like to add to the discussion specifically regarding that matter. So AT&T moderator, are you available?
Yes, ma'am, I'd be glad to. Ladies and gentlemen on the phone lines, if you'd like to provide a public comment for AB 3373, please press 1, then 0 at this time.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, this is Don Gakel, President of the CAA. I thought this might be an appropriate time to add that the CAA is also supporting AB 3373 and happy to support the clerks in their effort. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Hearing none, let me have Ms. Davis call the roll on the motion then.
Excuse my interruption. We did have people on the phone line with comment. Would that be at this time, sir?
Are they commenting on AB 3373?
Yes, sir, that is correct.
Oh, sure. Let's hear them.
Okay, thank you. Line number 38, your line is open.
Hi, this is Paul Waldman with the California Alliance of Taxpayer Advocates. I just want to say we are strongly in support of 3373 as well. I agree with Mr. McKibben that it doesn't make sense that there was any cap on that. And we feel it can only be a beneficial thing. Thank you.
Thank you.
And next we'll open line number 19. Your line is open.
Yes, this is Thomas Parker, LA County Counsel for the Assessment Appeals Board. I concur with everything that Mr. McKibben said and appreciate your board considering this motion. Thank you.
Thank you.
And once again, as a reminder, if you'd like to comment on AB 3373, please press 1, then 0 at this time. And we have no one else showing public comment. Please continue, sir.
Thank you. Ms. Davis, if we can go ahead and call the roll on this motion.
Chairman Vasquez?
Yes.
Vice Chairman Schaefer?
I think you're muted.
Vice Chairman Schaefer? Member Gaines?
Aye.
Member Cohen?
Aye.
Deputy Controller Stowers,
Aye.
Vice Chair,
Chairman Schaefer.
Vice Chair Schaefer here, and I vote aye.
So that's unanimous. Thank you. With that, let's continue. We had several other people on the line that wanted to speak on other options. Ms. Davis, if you can call them now.
Yes, we'd like the AT&T moderator. Are you there?
Yes. If you'd like to provide public comment, please press 1 then 0 at this time. We do have one person who's queued up. Line 27, your line is open. Line 27, please press 1 then 0. We'll go to line number 19. Your line is open. Line 19.
Yeah, yes, this is Thomas Parker again, Los Angeles County Council. I would urge the board to seek an executive order and work hand in hand with the CACEO and any other county organization to obtain relief from the governor to waive the 2-year time frame. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, this is John McKibben. I'd like to ask a question, if I may.
Sure, go ahead, Don.
I was scheduled to speak on these options. Do you wish to go forward with that, or shall we just dispense with it?
No, go ahead. If you have anything, especially if you have anything new to add from our last meeting.
I don't, since the last task force meeting. I don't know that we've had the full board has had a meeting on this point exactly, have we, since the task force report was issued?
No, this is our first meeting since the task force report.
Right.
So
if you
want,
be repetitive.
Did you want to just?
Mr. Chair, may I step in for a moment? I asked Mr. McKibben to be prepared to speak to this. If I would appreciate if we could lend him a couple minutes.
Sure, we'll give him a couple minutes. Go ahead. You want to give us a quick overview of other options we may want to consider, Mr. McGibbons?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Ms. Cohen. As you know, clerks of the Board of Supervisors are administrators of the Assessment Appeals Program, and our first priority, as I've indicated during the task force meetings, is to join with your board to go together to the governor and get the executive order that we drafted for that use. We firmly believe that your leadership is going to the governor is vital in persuading him to grant us the desired relief. In relation to the options, we also urge your board to grant all counties a 40-day extension, tolling the 2-year deadline for the short-term relief while we work with the governor. We recommend that you reject option 2, which calls for time-limited waivers for the 2-year deadline. We really hold firm to the notion that we don't have the ability to manage oftentimes thousands of differing time-limited waivers, and in limiting the waivers, it would be, in our view, contrary to existing law and Revenue and Taxation Code Section 1604. We support your option 3 in part. However, we strongly recommend that the word selectively be removed and that the executive order be applied to all appeals pending at the commencement of the emergency and all appeals received during that period, plus those filed during the 120 days following the conclusion of the emergency. Want to, once again, as I did at the task force meeting, assure the board that clerks and county boards fully intend to give taxpayers whose hearings were canceled due to the COVID-19 shutdown of our boards the top priority in scheduling once we reopen. But we want to make sure that all members of the board understand that we're going to be subject to social distancing requirements for an as yet undetermined period of time. We'll probably not be able to hold as many hearings each day that we were used to holding prior to the shutdown, again, due to social distancing. With regard to B2 on your agenda, regarding the possible action to extend the 60-day filing deadline on appeals of supplemental and escape assessments, We want to urge you to reject this existing law in Section 1605 already permits an applicant who did not receive a timely notice of reassessment to file an appeal within 60 days of the mailing of the tax bill, along with an affidavit signed under penalty of perjury. So options 1 and 3 we feel are wholly unnecessary, and we ask you not to implement option 2 since we believe it would prove to be unworkable. Instead, we recommend that your board prominently post on your website information for taxpayers about the procedure described in Section 1605, along with a sample affidavit form, as your board has been considering. County boards will do the same on our websites, although many of them already provide that information on the web and in other printed information. And taxpayers who file late will receive written notification from the clerk about the lack of timely filing and the remedies available to the taxpayer to cure. We greatly appreciate your support for AB 3373, and we look forward to its being enacted. And that really concludes all my planned statements with regard to Team 2 activities.
Thank you. Ms. Davis, do we have anybody else in the queue? Or Ms. Cohen, I see your hand. Did you have a question about that?
I don't have a question. After public comment, just want you to recognize me. I just want to say
Sure.
a couple comments after public comment. Thank you.
Anybody else from the public, Ms. Davis? On group 2?
AT&T, I'm going to check with the AT&T moderator to ensure that we have received all of the public comments that I believe there were 2 more people who would like to make comments.
That is correct.
Thank
Line
you.
number, my pleasure. Line 60, your line is open.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I actually wanted to comment on working group 3 and 4, so I don't know if that's the right time right now.
You want to hold that? Why don't you hold that? Do you have any comments for group 2? Okay.
I do not. Just group 3 and 4.
All righty. Well, we'll put you on the queue for 3 and 4.
Thank you.
And just as for the public, before you make your comment, if you could please state your name and if you have any affiliation prior to making the comment. Thank you so much. AT&T moderator, can you continue?
Yes, ma'am. Next, we'll open line number 38. Your line is open.
Yes, hi, this is Paul Waldman with California Alliance of Taxpayer Advocates. We wanted to, regarding the 2-year statute, we feel that option 1 is probably the most workable, as that's within your power under Section 155. Options 2 and 3 we are concerned about because those appear to be more voluntary, and therefore would not necessarily provide relief if the boards choose not to follow that encouragement. And of course, option 4 we feel is not the correct way to go. So we were pushing really for option 1. Option 2 and 3 are good additional options to add, but again we're concerned that they're just voluntary. With regard to the 60-day deadline, we were in favor of option 1. Again, that's under Section 155. And is within your power to do. Option, I apologize, I lost my place on here. I'm looking at it. With regard to waivers, if they were with a date certain, we would be acceptable for that, but we would be concerned about that otherwise. I apologize. I lost my. I got too many things on my screen here. But that's our preferences on group 2 options 1 and 2.
Thank you. Anyone else, Ms. Davis?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Don Gakel, President of the California Assessors Association. Mr. Gakel, are you available to make a comment?
Yeah, yes, I am. I wanted to say that the California Assessors Association supports the clerks in opposing use of Section 155 to extend appeal application deadlines for escape and supplemental assessments. And we feel that, as Mr. McKibben explained, that the taxpayers certainly have the option, if they did not get notice, to file an appeal within 60 days of receipt of the tax bill. We also agree that option 2, time-limited requests and waivers would not be practical for the appeals boards. And the California Assessors Association is committed to support of the CACEO effort to get an executive order to do a blanket extension of all appeals for the duration, for the period that the emergency is in effect, and plus 120 days, as they have proposed. And we'd be happy to work with the Clerks Association and the Board of Equalization in that effort. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else, Ms. Davis? Go ahead.
Yes, we do. Would you like for me to just go ahead and call the list and let you know when we've completed it, Mr. Chairman?
Sure, that works.
Okay, thank you. We have Chuck Leinhardt, Plumas County Assessor. Mr. Leinhardt, are you available to make a comment?
I am available to make a comment, and I will just echo what Mr. Gakel said. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Next, we have Marcy Berkman, Counsel for the Santa Clara County Assessment Appeals Board. Ms. Berkman, are you available?
I am. Good morning, and thank you for the opportunity to speak. I would like to echo my strong support for the executive order and appreciate the board's assistance on this, I hope. And I concur with Mr. McKibben regarding that time-limited waivers would not be a good way to go about things, and that an extension of time for filing escapes and supplementals is not necessary or appropriate, given that there's already a procedure under 1605B for filing on the tax bill with an affidavit. And I echo his encouragement to the board to post that on their website to make it easily available to all taxpayers, as with the county boards.
Thank you, Ms. Berkman. Thomas Parker, Los Angeles County AAB Counsel. Are you available, Mr. Parker? Mr. Parker, are you available to make your comment? If not, we're going to move forward to Paul Waldman, President, California Alliance of Taxpayer Advocates, CATA. Mr. Waldman, are you available? Mr. Waldman? If not, that is our last public commenter. Let me just double check to see if we have any written comments that need to be read into the record. If you can just wait just one moment, Mr. Chairman.
Sure.
Mr. Nanjo?
Yes.
Are you available to read into the record a public comment from number 33 on your list? I'm sorry.
32, Pat Martinez?
Yes.
Yes, I am.
Go ahead.
Okay, this public comment is from Pat Martinez. Quote, take action to extend the statute of limitations deadline for Assessment Appeals Board, AABs, to hear taxpayer appeals, RTC 1604, due to their inability to hold hearings during the shelter-in-place orders resulting from COVID-19, unquote. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Nanjo. We just want to make sure that we've been able to capture given everyone an opportunity to speak that has asked to speak. Mr. Paul Waldman, President of CATA, are you on the line?
Ms. Davis, I believe Mr. Waldman has already spoken on this issue.
Okay. then if the AT&T moderator, are you still available? Can you just make sure that we have not received any more public comments?
Ladies and gentlemen, as a reminder, if you'd like to provide a public comment on AB 3373, please press 1, then 0 at this time.
I'm sorry, AT&T moderator, we've gone on to work group 2 issues, so we're done on 3373.
My apologies. If you'd like to provide a public comment, please press 1, then 0 at this time. And there's no one else in queue. Please continue.
Okay, Chairman Vasquez, I believe that may be our last public comment that we've received. Just let me double check. There are 2 more, I'm sorry. Mr. LeBeau, Mike LeBeau, are you available? If he isn't available, Mr. Nanjo, have you received a public comment from Mike LeBeau that you'd like to read into the record at this time?
Yes, I have. I can read his comment. This is from Mike LeBeau. Comment, quote, I support a short 90-day extension to all assessment appeals deadlines, provided those extensions appeal to both the government and taxpayers. With the latest news, the LA County Assessment Appeals Board will have been shut down for exactly 3 months. We, as professional tax advisors, must recognize the incredible hardship this creates for appeals boards and their clerks and allow them extra time they need to catch up. That same extension should also apply to appeals board application filing deadlines because local government offices have been closed to in-person transactions, and in some cases, taxpayers did not have access to their mail during this crisis. In regards to Section 170 relief, I support CADA's position. Despite disagreements, we are confronting an invisible contamination that is causing, in many cases, both physical and economic damage. I request that the board adopt both option 1, issuing a letter to assessors encouraging acceptance of claims for mid-year declines in value, and option 2, supporting legislation to amend RTC 170 to further define economic/physical damage and or seek executive order from the governor, unquote. My apologies, but his comment was for both working group 2 and 3. Thank you.
If no other public commenters are available for the moderator, Mr. Vasquez, Chairman Vasquez, I believe that may be our last public comment for this issue.
Thank you. Members, so this is now before us. It looks like there's some support, obviously, for option 1 and 3 with some modifications. And I'm hearing some, or I guess just one in support of option 2, but it looks like there's several that are against option 2. So, and I know Ms. Cohen wanted to make some comments, so let me open it up to the members, starting with Ms. Cohen.
Thank you very much. I've got some remarks I just wanted to acknowledge. Mr. McKibben, thank you for chiming in, and thank you to all the members of the public that have spoken. I support Mr. McKibben's recommendation about the posting and requesting that the governor issue an executive order consistent with the recommendations of the clerk of the boards, of the elected officials, of the Assessment Appeals Board, all this to extend the toll taxpayer appeals for 120 days beyond the duration of COVID-19 emergency. And I believe that this recommendation provides the greatest flexibility and also reflects the fact that the Assessment Appeals Boards have backlog challenges. So therefore, I move that this board send a letter to the governor recommending that he issue an executive order extending the tolling assessment appeals for the duration of COVID-19 and emergency plus 120 days. And I'd like to also move that we adopt this recommendation, again, to post a recommendation from Mr. McKibben to post the letter and our findings to our website.
Second.
Thank you.
So it's been moved and second. Just one point of clarification, Ms. Cohen?
Yes.
I think he said that he wanted to take selectively out and say all. Is that what you're also asking, or?
I did not ask, I did not make that motion, but if you'd like to make it, that's fine.
Okay, that's what I thought I heard. I just wanted to make sure.
He did make that recommendation, but in my motion, I did not.
Are you comfortable with that?
No. Actually,
Okay.
I'm not.
So we'll leave it as is, the way it's written selectively?
Yes, sir. I'd appreciate that.
Not a problem.
Thank you.
Question, if I could?
Yes, Mr. Gaines.
Could you please clarify that point?
Which one?
In terms of how the motion reads versus what was requested?
Oh.
Mr. McKibben, thank you.
Mr. McKibben made a request for a word substitution.
Selectively, I believe it was, yeah.
May I speak?
Yes.
I think if we go back to their original submission, they have some language on what they would like for the executive order to read. And so he's asking us not to say selective. He wants it to be consistent with all counties. So he wants for the executive order to toll the 2-year statute across the board, not that we can pick and choose.
That was my question to Member Cohen. But it's your motion, so however you want to do it.
It is my motion, and seeing how it's unclear, perhaps we can ask Mr. McKibben to come back and to restate his recommendation, just so that we're all, so you hear it from him and I'm not paraphrasing. Is that fair?
Sure, okay. Go ahead. Is he available online?
Yes, I am, Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead. If you can restate. I know you were supporting option 3, but you had one correction or one suggestion to eliminate selectively. Can you please repeat that?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. You're correct. We did not want to see selectively in there. We want that taken out, and that the executive order would read as we've submitted previously, that it would extend across the board to all counties equally. The executive order would extend and toll the 2-year deadline in 1604C for the duration of the declared emergency, whether by the governor or the emergency declared by an individual county, whichever is of longer duration, plus 120 days to give us the time to start rescheduling, deal with health department demands for social distancing and whatnot. If it would help, if I can lay hands on a copy of our executive order, I can read that to you if you would like, for the purposes of the record.
Sure. Do you have it handy?
Yes, I do. The order would say, exclusive of all the whereases that we've written that lead up to it, notwithstanding Revenue and Taxation Code Section 1604, the 2-year deadline by which a county board must render a decision in an assessment appeal shall be extended and tolled for the duration of the COVID-19 emergency, as defined by state or county declarations of emergency, whichever is of longer duration, plus 120 days after the termination of the emergency to allow county boards to resume normal operations, provide taxpayers and assessors time to prepare for resumed hearing schedules, and to reduce the backlog of appeals to a manageable level.
Thank you.
With respect specifically to option 3 under item 1, we were opposed to including selectivity, or selectively, excuse me.
Mr. McKibben, thank you very much for your clarification. And so my motion is for the board to adopt the exact language that Mr. McKibben just read, as well as adding it to the website. Mr. McKibben, you didn't say that part, but I will eliminate discussion about option 3.
Question, if I could?
Yes, go ahead, Mr. Gaines.
I'd like clarification in terms of the board's authority. We have 40 days of authority. Would that be included in the motion, that we would extend 40 days and then we would send the letter to the governor requesting the executive order that would go through the end of the pandemic plus 120 days?
Who's your question to, Mr. Gaines?
I believe to the maker of the motion, no?
Yes, the maker of the motion.
Oh,
So that's
okay.
you, Ms. Khan.
Yes. Okay.
My thinking was that, and I thought we had some discussion maybe in prior meetings, but to go ahead and exercise our 40 days of authority, that extension, and then that would be coupled with a letter, basically the letter from the clerks. I don't have any issues with what they're proposing. I just thought that we could include also our 40 days of authority and then extend beyond that.
Perhaps just because we want to keep things simple, maybe we just keep the two topics separate.
If I can assist here, this is Henry Nancho, Chief Counsel.
Yes, go ahead, Henry.
So
thank you. Thank you, Chairman Vasquez.
Mr. Nancho, before you, just for clarification, Mr. Gaines, my motion is really just to accept Mr. McKibben's recommendations that we just heard. And so I would prefer to keep the item that you're referring to separate from Mr. McKibben's recommendations. Just it's easier, cleaner for people to read and follow in the record. That's the only reason. That's my thinking. Mr. Nanjo, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Member Cohen. Member Gaines, just as a point of clarification.
Vice Chair Schaefer, I do have a comment too.
Sure. Well, we'll put you in the queue. Go ahead, Henry.
Okay. Member Gaines, just as a point of clarification, they're really two separate issues. So the board still has its authority for its 40-day granting of a 40-day extension, and that will continue. This is actually a separate issue and would be on top of that. So it would be, to Member Cohen's point, it would be appropriate to keep the issues separate.
Okay, all right. So at what point do we exercise the 40-day extension as a board?
The 40-day extension is being granted by your executive director pursuant to the rules upon request. So those are going to continue. In the absence of the executive order, those will continue to be granted as assessment appeals boards and or assessors request them. And then what happens is if the governor does issue an executive order, that's on top of our 40-day extension.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Sure.
Vice Chair Schaefer, I believe you had a comment.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I echo Member Gaines' views on this. We tend to support alternative 1 and not 3. We're concerned that this appears to be open-ended, and we don't know whether the virus is going to last forever or till tomorrow. I mean, it's so unknown and so open-ended, and I think we're better able to deal with it under option 1, and we support Member Gaines here. Thank you.
Excuse my interruption. This is the operator with AT&T. We do have one person that's queued up for comment.
On this motion?
Yes, sir.
Sure, go ahead.
Line 19, your line is open.
At this point, I have nothing to add. This is Thomas Parker, Los Angeles County Council, AAB. I just merely echo everything that Marcy Berkman, the assessors, and Mr. McKibben have said. Thank you.
Go ahead, Ms. Cohen. I believe, Ms. Cohen, you had something?
No, I think, if I'm not mistaken, the record will reflect that I made the motion, has seconded, and so at this point, it's a matter of vote.
All righty. Hearing no other comments? Ms. Dowers, I know we changed the motion. I'm assuming you're comfortable as a seconder?
Yes, I am.
Okay, so we have the motion that's basically following the executive order that was read by Mr. McKibben before us, correct?
Correct.
All righty. Ms. Davis, if you could just please call the roll.
Chairman Vasquez,
Yes.
Vice Chairman Schaefer,
No?
Member Gaines,
Yes.
Member Cohen,
Aye.
Deputy Controller Stowers,
Yes.
So that's 4-1, and we'll go ahead and move on. Members, now, Mr. Gaines, I think you had another option, another suggestion that is separate from this. Did you want to take that up now?
Yes, I would. I would like to make a motion that we provide the 40-day extension under Section 155 as it relates to AABs.
I second that, Vice Chair Schaefer.
So that's been moved and second. Any discussion?
I have a question.
Yes, Ms. Stowers.
So we're saying, Mr. Gaines, to just issue the LTA in general without the board's asking for the additional 40 days?
Yes, I would.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, because we're asking for the executive order from the governor to all 58 counties. So I think we ought to be consistent on the 40-day extension. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Mr. Chairman, this is Gibbon. Yes, would it be appropriate for me to ask a question now or under public comment?
Under public comment. This is right now just the board that's taking up this motion. Go ahead, Ms. Cohen.
Mr. Chair, I would actually be interested in asking Mr. McKibben just for further clarification that on the vote that we just took about the posting, I don't think that was clear. The recommendation to post to our website.
Well, I thought that was included in your motion. You're saying that you're not sure.
It was. Okay, let me scratch that. Perhaps the executive director can address the board before the vote on this issue. This is relating to the posting. This is just a point of clarification. I don't know if Ms. Brenda Fleming is listening.
But Ms. Cohen, this is not pertaining to the motion at hand, though, is it?
No, it's not. You're absolutely right. It's the previous.
Can we hold it for just a second then?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Is there any comments or questions or clarifications on we have the motion before us now by Mr. Gaines and second by Vice Chair Schaefer. Is everybody comfortable with the motion, or are there any other comments, or are we prepared to vote?
I would like to hear public comments, please.
On this motion?
Yeah, I thought Mr. McKibben had a comment on it.
Well, I mean, what's the will of the members? I thought
I'm happy to listen to public comment, of course, always.
No, so am I. I just didn't know if we wanted to, we have a motion on the floor. I'd like to see if there's consensus here, take action or no action on the motion, and then we can go back to the order of business. I just don't want to see us get interrupted by the public throughout this meeting. Otherwise, this is really for us to discuss and hopefully take positions or no positions.
Yes, I can understand that perspective. I think that for me, the public's opinion and their comments help inform my vote and help inform my position. So that's generally why I like to hear what we're voting on, hear from the public comment, and then take the vote.
Well, that's what I thought we did.
Ms. Stowers, I believe Ms. Stowers made a request for public comment.
Yes, I thought we had, after Mr. Gaines clarified that he was asking to force the board to issue an LTA for all of the counties, although they have not asked for one, just to be consistent. I thought that Mr. McKibben said that he had a comment with respect to that clarification. And I just wanted to hear what his comment was.
Well, if you remember, before we got to this point, we closed the public comment. We asked everybody to speak on group 2, and we exhausted that. I don't want us to keep going back and reopening something that we just closed. That doesn't make any sense.
I agree with what you're saying, sir. You're the chair. I would
got to this point, I asked, is there any more public comments? And Ms. Davis said no.
Okay,
I don't want us, as we start discussing things, have somebody try to interject into our conversation. That's all.
Okay. Perhaps we have not had an executive director on work group 2 on this particular item. So perhaps she would be able to make her presentation.
Brenda Frowmy, you're asking?
Yes, sir.
Yes. Is she available?
Hi, this is Brenda. Thank you for the opportunity. So just to clarify, are you asking for a position on the LTAs regarding our ability currently to extend deadlines? I just want to clarify what the request is.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I'm actually asking for you to opine on Member Gaines' motion. And perhaps it might be helpful, Mr. Gaines, if you would just restate your motion.
Yeah, it was to use our authority to extend by 40 days the ability to, under Section 155, as it relates to the 2-year deadline for assessment appeal boards.
Correct. Thank you for that opportunity. So we currently have authority and have been exercising our authority under RTC 155 to extend deadlines to AABs and to the assessors as they requested. The statute reads that it's a 30-day extension and 40 days for public calamity. So as, in this case, as AABs have been requesting extensions, it really depends on how it's requested of us. We've got some that are for 40-day requests, others may be a 30-day request, and there's some variation into how the requests are actually stated. What we do is do an analysis of their request to make the determination as to how to respond to it based upon the ask, the appeals that might be articulated in the request, and the duration, the time frame for which they're asking. But we currently, Mr. Gaines, are exercising our authority under RTC 155 to grant 40-day extensions based upon public calamity to those requesters. And we've to date had a few of them, and in fact at the May 27th meeting, I read the list of those that had been received, those requests that had been received, and those that had been granted. To date, we've not denied any. It's not our practice to deny them. The requests are legitimate under RTC 155. Does that help answer your question?
It helps bring clarity for me, Madam Executive Director. Thank you very much. Mr. Gaines, I wanted to see if it was helpful for you.
Oh yeah, I still want to move forward with the motion. I just want to provide clarity coming from the board in terms of our authority as members of the BOE to provide that clarity to all 58 counties.
So are we ready to vote, members?
And members, we actually have provided, LTAs to clarify this before. So there are current LTAs that speak to the board's ability to offer those extensions to both AABs and to the assessors.
Oh, I appreciate that, but I'd still like to move forward with the motion. Thank you.
Understood. Thank you.
Are we prepared to vote, members?
Not yet. Mr. Gaines, could you tell me what are we attempting to accomplish with this motion? What is our
I'm trying to clarify our authority as members of the BOE. And one of those authorities is in a situation similar to what we're experiencing here in California, that we have the authority to extend by 40 days as it relates to assessment appeal boards. And I don't want that to be lost in the conversation, because we've been asking for a lot of authority from the governor. We're about ready to send an executive order to the governor asking for an extension beyond our authority. So I think we need to have the clarity of what is our authority as members of the BOE, and then we follow through with a executive order to the governor, which is asking for an extension beyond our authority.
Well, I colleagues, want to just say that I believe that our authority is clearly delineated and spelled out. It's spelled out in the statute, and in particularly under these circumstances, we've addressed the question of our authority, and I do believe that it is well within our authority to to issue an executive order or a letter to the governor asking him to draft an executive order. I don't know, maybe the chief counsel is able to opine on this, if he's able to clarify where our authority lines are. It still seems to be unclear.
Hi, this is Henry Nanjo, Chief Counsel. To the board members, as Ms. Fleming, our Executive Director, has stated, this authority to extend the deadline for 40 days in case of public calamity is well publicized, is well known among both the assessors and the assessment appeals boards, and they are taking advantage of that. Perhaps if I can add some clarity, there have been situations where assessment appeals board have chosen not to request a blanket 40-day extension on all of their matters, but rather have, for whatever reason, have requested specific extensions as to particular matters. The challenge in the motion as currently stated is it would take that flexibility away from the assessment appeals board and automatically grant all of them a 40-day extension, whether they feel it necessary or not. So that is one point to be made about the potential motion. So I don't know if that clears up the issue, but these authorities to grant are well known and are being requested by various assessment appeals boards.
Thank you very much. Mr. Gaines, does that answer your question about authority?
What I'd like to do is amend my motion if I could.
Sure, go ahead.
And the motion would be to extend by 40 days under Section 155, the 2-year deadline for assessment appeal boards as needed on a county basis.
Is that acceptable by the seconder, Mr. Schaefer, Vice Chair Schaefer?
Aye. I seconder, I support his amendment.
You support it? Okay. So does that clear it up for other members? Are we prepared to vote? Hearing no comments, Ms. Davis, if you can call the roll.
Chairman Vasquez,
Yes.
Vice Chair Schaefer,
Aye.
Member Gaines,
Aye.
Member Cohen,
No.
Deputy Controller Stowers,
No.
So that is 3-2. That moves forward. Any other items or motions people want to make on Group 2?
Chair, this is Vice Chair Schaefer.
Vice Chair Schaefer, go ahead.
I'd like to change my vote on the prior motion from nay to aye because of consistency in supporting what the board is trying to do.
You actually voted for it, so what do you change?
The prior motion, I voted no, the previous one.
Oh, the previous one. Okay.
Option 3, yes. Can I change that from nay to aye?
Well noted.
Thank you.
Any other move? We have other options here, or we can just move on to Group 3 unless somebody has something they want to recommend. I see Ms. Cohen. Did you have a question?
Yes, since we were addressing the change in motion for the prior one, I wanted to ask Mr. McGibbons again to come forward to talk about the posting recommendation. It's still unclear to me, his posting recommendation to the website. I'm of the mindset that it's very clear that it's going to he wants us to post to the website, but I need him to clearly state what exactly he's proposing in his in the motion. This is the previous motion, not the one we just took, but the one dealing with with
option 3, I think it was, wasn't it? Right.
Yes, thank you.
Is Mr. McKibben available?
Yes, I am, Mr. Chair.
Sure, if you want to go ahead and just clear up which on the website recommendation.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I may have confuse matters, it wasn't option 3 exactly. Let me see if you can bear with me.
If you could state for the record the recommendation that you have on posting to our website.
Yes. The posting information I was referring to would be to post on both your website and counties to post on their websites if they have not already done so. The information about how to cure, the information about how to file for an assessment appeal on an escape or a supplemental assessment when the taxpayer has missed the filing deadline, the normal filing deadline, of 60 days after the date of the notice because they failed to get the notice.
All right,
what we were proposing there, I don't know that was intended to be a part of the motion. It just would be an administrative thing that both counties and your board could do.
Mr. McGibbon, I appreciate that Mr. McGibbon, I appreciate that it's an administrative function, but what I'm trying to do is to make sure that the record is very clear and very accurate in stating what your records are. So although it may seem cumbersome, but I want to make sure that we take the appropriate vote so that we're very clear and deliberate on how we're communicating, most importantly, with the public. So that's why I asked you to restate the posting motion. So members, I just want to make sure that, I just want to make sure that we all understood that we are agreeing to this recommendation that Mr. McKibben just read into the record. I see a yes nod from Ms. Stowers, and I think everyone else might be processing. Mr. Gaines is nodding yes. And Mr. Vasquez is nodding yes. Okay, so I just want to make sure that we are on the record in the affirmative. And Mr. Schaefer, thank you for correcting the record with your position. Thank you.
Thank you.
We can continue. This is Henry Nanjo. Guys,
go ahead.
Sorry to interrupt. Chairman Vasquez, this is Henry Nanjo. Just so that we have an official vote, can we recall the vote that Member Schaefer would like to change his vote on and have the clerk call that roll for that particular motion again? And this is the motion to send a executive or request for an executive order with the language that Mr. McKibben and the Clerks Association suggested in their letter.
So I'll make a motion to rescind the previous vote. And this is a motion to rescind the vote on the executive order regarding the language, accepting the language that Mr. McKibben has proposed.
With the inclusion of the website.
Rescind the vote, so that allows us to clear the record and move forward. I just need a second, and then we...
Second.
And then Ms. Stowers is the second. And we'll go ahead and let's retake that vote, Ms. Davis.
Chairman Vasquez?
Yes.
Vice Chairman Schaefer?
Aye.
Member Gaines?
Aye.
Cohen?
Yes.
Deputy Controller Stowers?
Yes.
All right,
okay,
so now
that rescinds the vote. Now we need to retake that vote then.
So just so we're clear, that was an affirmative vote to affirm the motion to rescind. Now we are going to retake the vote.
Correct. Thank you, Member Cohen.
You're welcome. Okay, so Mr. Vasquez, you can call the
roll. Go ahead, Ms. Davis.
You can call the roll again. This is just, again, to affirm the recommendations. This is a motion to affirm the recommendations made by Mr. McKibben, paying careful noting to how we are going to post on as well as the county websites for communication purposes. And again, Mr. McKibben has gone on the record to clarify the posting.
Second.
Okay, I'm assuming Ms. Cohen, Member Cohen, you're making the motion, and Deputy Controller Stowers, you're still seconding that motion?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you.
So we have our motion, our second. Ms. Davis, if you can call the roll again.
Chairman Vasquez?
Yes.
Vice Chairman Schaefer?
Aye.
Member Gaines,
Aye.
Member Cohen,
Aye.
Deputy Controller Stowers,
Aye.
So that's unanimous.
Yes.
All right, members.
All right.
Is there anything else we need to add on work group 2? Comments, suggestions? Are we prepared to move on to group 3? I'm seeing some nodded heads.
Let's move on to group 3.
Let's go on to group 3. Ms. Davis.
Chairman Vasquez, would you like to take a 5-minute break before we move to group 3?
Sure, if that's what the members wish.
I wouldn't mind 5 minutes.
Sure, I will go ahead and take 5 minutes, and then we'll be right back. So
Members,
this is,
you can please make sure you mute your microphones. Thank you so much.
so I have 11:27, so we'll try to get back here at 11:33. Thank you. call the next item.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The next item is Work Group Number 3, Section 170, Disaster Relief for COVID-19 Calamity, facilitated by Chairman Vasquez. We have 3 listed speakers presenting on this item and 3 invited speakers. Additionally, we have received requests for public comments on this item. Chairman Vasquez.
Thank you. Members, in my view, based on the immediate and long-term need, I support doing both option 1 and option 3 on a dual track so that every administrative solution is available to the clerks. I move we do this dual track our solutions by 1, issuing an LTA extending the 2-year deadline for AAB's boards by 40 days under Section 155, and number 2, join the Clerks Association to request an executive order for tolling of the deadline during the restricted access plus 120 days after reopening is permitted. Is there a second?
Vice Chair Schaefer, second.
It's a second. Any?
I'm sorry, member, Chairman Vasquez?
Yes.
I believe you're talking about the issue that we already had the vote on.
You know what? You may be right, Henry.
Yeah.
Yes, I think you are. I'm looking at my notes. I flipped my notes. Yes. Let me find I'm looking for number 3. We're on group 3 here.
That's correct. Thank you. Just wanted to provide that clarification.
Thank you. Okay, here we are. So now we're on group 3. This is the section 170 disaster relief for COVID-19 calamity. There are 2 issues on this item. Issue 1, what is the property physically damaged or destroyed? In Article number 13, Section 15 of the Constitution and RTC Section 170 disaster relief, in which the legislators define damage to include a diminution in value as a result of restricted access to property. Issue 1, can and should the legislators amend RTC 170 to allow for mid-year disaster reassessment resulting from COVID-19 restricted cases? We have 4 options for board consideration. Option 1, issue an LTA encouraging acceptance of claims for mid-year declines in value due to COVID-19 restricted access. If denied, taxpayers may go to court where the issue can be fully addressed. Option 2, propose support legislation amending RTC 170 to further define economic and physical damage due to restricted access and/or seek executive order from the governor. Option 3, issue a letter to assessors providing guidance on the board's current interpretation of 170 relief. And then option 4, conduct further analysis. What are the thoughts and comments or suggestions from the members?
Well, Mr. Chair, this is Member Cohen.
Member Cohen, go ahead.
I was wondering if we could hear from our speakers, perhaps listed agenda, and maybe even take public testimony first.
Sure, if that's the will, we'll go ahead. Let me ask Ms. Davis, do we have members in the queue for group number 3 or work group number 3?
We do, Mr. Chairman. We also have public commenters that are listed on the agenda. Would you like to hear from them?
If they're for work group 3, yes.
Let's hear from the speakers first, then we'll hear public comment.
Question, if I could. Sorry to
yes,
mix it up even more. But at what point do you want me to discuss Senate Bill 1431? Laser bill.
Where is it on the agenda? Do you know, Ted?
Well, I'm just showing, it said overview of prior Attorney General opinion from Henry Nanjo, and then I do an overview of Senate Bill 1431. I'm showing that kind of on the top, but
Right.
You're right, Mr. Gaines. You want to go ahead? Why don't you go ahead and get into that, or bring it up now?
Okay.
Hold on. If I may, let's just stick with the printed agenda. So let's go with the overview of the prior Attorney General opinion, Mr. Nanjo, then go to overview Senate Bill 1431. Just
that's fine.
On the agenda. Thank you.
Good.
Sure, go ahead. Is Mr. Nanjo there?
Yes, I am. Thank you very much, Chairman Vasquez, members. So we have two Attorney General's opinions which have been on this particular subject. I'm actually going to tag team this with Richard Moon from my staff. The first Attorney General's opinion, if I can tee it up, was issued on November 17th, 1972. The subject was reassessment of physically undamaged property in a disaster area relating to Section 155.1 of the Revenue and Taxation Code. Their issue, the question that was asked was, does Revenue and Taxation Code Section 155.1 allow for reassessment of property in a disaster area which is not physically damaged and does not suffer impaired access but experiences economic devaluation by reason of its location therein? The conclusion in that Attorney General opinion was that, quote, Revenue and Taxation Code Section 155.1 does not apply to such an economic loss suffered by property in a disaster area. Therefore, no reassessment of such property is permitted thereunder. The second Attorney General opinion is dated May 14th, 1975, and this one had two issues. One was what is the meaning of misfortune and calamity as used in Revenue and Taxation Code Section 155.13? And two, do local agencies have their authority under Revenue and Taxation Code Section 155.13 to limit reassessment to taxpayers experiencing specific types of misfortune or calamities, such as loss by fire? The conclusions were that, in that opinion, misfortune or calamity as used within Revenue and Taxation Code Section 155.13 encompasses any type of adversity which befalls one in an unpredictable manner. And two, local agencies do not have the authority under Revenue and Taxation Code 155.13 to limit reassessment to taxpayers experiencing specific types of misfortunes or calamities. Mr. Moon, are you available to provide additional details?
Yes, I am. Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Richard Moon with the legal department. I would just add a couple things to what our chief counsel had mentioned about the Attorney General's opinions. The first is that although the 75 Attorney General opinion was not about the definition of damage, it did cite the 72 opinion's definition of damage, and it stated, and I'm quoting here, as noted in a prior opinion of this office, the words damaged or destroyed as used in the comparably worded Section 155.1, which was a predecessor statute of 170, does not encompass economic loss in the absence of physical injury. The other thing I would note is that both of these Attorney General opinions were discussed in the case Slocum versus the Board of Equalization. And in that case, the appellants had argued that those opinions support the fact that Section 170 applies to economic loss. And that's how they read those two opinions. The court's response was to disagree, and not only disagree, they were quite strong, and they called those arguments convoluted and wrong. And so the way that the courts viewed both of those Attorney General opinions was that it did not support the appellant's arguments in that case, that pure economic losses would qualify under the predecessor statutes to 170. I'm happy to take any questions you might have.
Members, are there any questions of either Henry or Mr. Moon?
No questions. I have no question, thank you.
Seeing none? No? Do we have any At this point, do we have any members of the public that are queued up specifically for this item?
AT&T moderator, has anyone indicated they'd like to bring public comment at this time?
Yes, ma'am, we do have a few in queue. We'll go to line number 100. Your line is open.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Michael LeBeau, thank you for your patience earlier, and thank you to Chief Counsel Nanjo for reading my written comments. Technical difficulties prevented me from speaking out earlier when called upon. I appreciate your patience. I did have a question with regards to how section, I have a comment regarding section 170 and its application to possessory interest specifically. When we're dealing with fee-owned property, the two Attorney General's opinions are quite clear, as is the Slocum decision. But section 170A3 addresses the right, the restriction on the right to enter a taxable possessory interest. And I would ask the board to provide clarification in regards to how the stay-at-home orders affects the right of a possessory interest holder to enter the property and whether that qualifies it for relief absent physical damage to the possessory interest. And would ask the board that they would consider providing guidance in that regard. Thank you.
Thank you.
And next we'll open line number 53. Your line is open.
Hi, this is Lenny Goldberg, California Tax Reform Association. I'm not going to comment on the legality of it. Others have done that. I think this is a totally inappropriate way to approach potential reductions in value due to an economic recession. The property tax, when an assessor looks at physical damage, they can see a flood, a fire, an earthquake has knocked down the building or made it uninhabitable or useless. A hotel still stands. It may or may not be reopening. It may or may not have a property tax high or low. I think this effort and I'll say this again in the next section as well, the effort completely ignores how Prop 13 works, where hotels on the beach in Santa Barbara have 1975 values and have no need for property tax relief. Other hotels are maybe at full market value and others at a fraction of that. It makes no sense to be even thinking about property tax relief as part of this. And in particular, we see, oh, well, there's been an uptick. Property values reflect long-term values. Disaster relief is clear. A building has lost to fire. It's clear that it burned down and does not have any value. A hotel that is standing there in an economic recession or in a travel restriction, still has a long-term value. It may have a reduced value depending on how long the restriction lasts. But this is a really totally inappropriate attempt by commercial property owners to get relief when there is no indication of disaster relief being appropriate. So we urge two things. One is that you vote to oppose the Glazer bill in front of the legislature. And second, you reject any efforts to try to change the disaster relief, either statute or application, to an economic recession. We have processes that we have Proposition 8, which allows for temporary reductions in value. But we're in a very fluid situation, and I'll probably be repeating these for Work Group 4 as well. There is no justification either because under Prop 13 where property taxes can be extremely low. Maybe when we equalize those commercial property taxes and put them at market value, there'll be an argument not for disaster relief from an economic recession, but an argument for lowering those values when a recession occurs. But this is completely inappropriate, and we urge rejection of the bill.
AT&T moderator, if you can allow me to read the next commenter or announce the next commenter. Don Gakel, President of the California Assessors Association. Are you available?
Yes, I am. Don Gakel, San Jose County Assessor and President of the California Assessors Association. The association, of course, addressing the options that the board is considering, or at least has before them. The CAA would oppose any LTA asking assessors to accept filings for disaster relief, the basis of which are contrary to Article 13, Section 15 of the California Constitution, which requires physical damage must occur to qualify for relief. Option two, of course, this comes into the Glazer bill, support legislation to amend RTC 170 to further define economic physical damage and seek executive order from the governor. Again, Article 13 requires physical damage, and the California Assessors Association is on record in opposing the Glazer bill or any effort that attempts to amend Section 170 that is not in keeping with the Article 13, Section 15 constitutional requirement for physical damage. And we have provided our opposition letter to the board members. Thank you.
Cindy Gomper-Graves, President and CEO, South County Economic Development Council, San Diego County.
Clerk Davis, this is Henry Nanjo, Acting Board Proceedings Chief. I believe Ms. Gompner Harris has had to get off the line, and I've been asked to read her comment into the record.
Go ahead, Mr. Nanjo.
Thank you.
This is, pardon me, Chief Counsel, this is Vice Chair Schaefer. I've been asked by my constituent to read. Did she change her mind on this, or do we have competing views? I just have...
It's not a problem, Member Schaefer or Vice Chair Schaefer. Typically, board proceedings reads the comment, but if you'd like to do that, that's fine. I will defer to you.
Thank you. Ms. Gomper-Graves of the South County Economic Development Council from San Diego County was scheduled to speak last week with us, but she's unable to be with us today, and I would like to read her comments for the record. Would that be appropriate at this time, Chair Vasquez?
Sure, go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you for allowing businesses to have a voice in your discussions, Chair and members of the board. Before I convey a request, I wanted to share some statistics with you. According to SBA 2019 CA Small Business Profile of Small Businesses numbered 4 million and accounted for over 90% of all businesses in the state of California, employed 7.1 million people and 48% of our private workforce. These numbers reflect small business is an important thread in the state's economic prosperity. But the impacts of the worldwide pandemic are devastating to them. The Los Angeles Times last month reported in a survey done by the National Federation of Independent Businesses conveyed that almost 50% of small businesses across the United States are in danger of failing. We have heard about national corporations filing for bankruptcy and closing some or all of their establishments during the last 2 months. Companies like JCPenney, which is closed planning to close about half of their facilities, Nordstrom, Soup Plantation, which is closing every one of their facilities, just to name a few. But the impact of this national state of emergency is greater on small businesses whose owners on the average make roughly $70,000 annually and do not have the reserves to dip into to survive this. This impact has called businesses like hair and nail salons to close completely, while other businesses are trying to stay afloat by retooling their service to the public. restaurants who've gone from dine-in seating to finding a way to create new market with just takeout service. Many businesses have had to reduce their workforce, and now the business owners are working themselves doing multiple tasks. I know at Bully's East in San Diego, the owner is answering the phone and delivering the orders. When they're not working, they're trying to navigate how to stay alive, spending time seeking and applying for financial assistance to remain open. There are many programs, but it takes time away. Pursue those. This too has impacted the businesses. Law offices, accountants, and others are burning the midnight oil trying to assist their clients by gathering data, preparing correspondence, and other tasks. I've had emails on weekends from the superintendent of the Sweetwater School District working with me on a $1,000 scholarship that I'm putting into effect for their students going to UC Berkeley, which is my alma mater. When you are asking small businesses to comply with your standard process and procedures, you are not recognizing the national state of emergency, not understanding the additional burden you are placing on these businesses who today have a high, unparalleled risk of failure like never before since they've been in business. And the phased reopening of these businesses, while it's good news, adds to the existing list of duties. And now I have a request. These are unprecedented times, and it does call for unprecedented action. I respectfully request you look at your processes and determine how you can make it easier for the small business community. Can you allow more time to process information, similar to what you did with property tax statement deadlines? Can time extensions be automatic and not have to be completing another paper form? Can you waive or reduce or defer fees? Of course you can. Thank you for your time and willingness to listen today. All assistance to reduce the burden on small business is appreciated. And this is Cindy Gomper-Graves, President and CEO of the South County Economic Development Council here in San Diego County, but this would really apply to small business everywhere. Thank you.
Mr. Charles Mall III, McDermott, Will and Emery, LLP, are you available?
Yes, I am.
Go ahead, sir.
Thank you. This is Charles Mall with McDermott, Will and Emery. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and honorable members of the board. As we've just heard from the prior speaker, and we all recognize these are unprecedented times, we've never seen a pandemic like this in our lifetime. And I think the human and economic devastation that's wrought upon all of us is unprecedented. Record unemployment, you've heard about business failures, both large and small. The government budget stretched to breaking points trying to deal with this. But we have hope. With the reopenings across the country and here in California, we're at a crossroads. Will we sink further into a depression like the Great Depression of the 1930s? Or will we pull ourselves out and resurrect this great economic engine of California that benefits all of us living here in California? Well, my view is this is not the time to pull up the ladder, circle the wagons. This is the time to come together. And we have a section 170A1, that provides us with a tool to help prime the pump and kickstart the economy. We've heard, indeed, I guess I would say this first, is, we've heard about, we can't, if a hotel burns down, we can't give them relief, but we already have other relief in the code for that. We have relief under the supplemental assessment system, where if there's construction or demolition or destruction of property during the year, then on the, mid-year, that property gets relief. Section 170 is intended to do something else. It's intended to fix a problem like we have here. And to remind the members of the board, there is a section 170A1 which has been interpreted by the court in Slocum. The court also dealt with subsection 170A2, and in that case, the court expressly distinguished the two subdivisions, and the court expressly stated that unlike 170A2, which was the specific subdivision for which the plaintiffs in that case were claiming relief, 170A1 did not require direct physical damage. And so I think that's a very important distinction to remember if you haven't read that case or that section very carefully. And I commend Mr. Nanjo and Mr. Moon on researching the Attorney General's opinions from 1972 and 1975. They have accurately stated what those Attorney General opinions said. They have accurately stated how the court in Slocum addressed them. But I want to keep everyone's focused on what the court was saying is those Attorney General's opinions really apply to the taxpayer's claim under 170A2. The court expressly said 170A1, which is what we're dealing with here when you have a governor's declaration, was different and distinguished the two sections. So the AG's opinion, which may be relevant for 170A2, the court came out with a different conclusion for 170A1. And so I would say that, of course, we'd have to follow the court's decision, and since we're looking for relief under 170A1 with the governor's declaration, really those Attorney General's opinions aren't really relevant, as the court said. And the court went through those Attorney General's opinions as well for 170A1. Finally, my last comment would certainly be that we've had some that have also questioned the constitutionality. You heard that today, you've heard that before, of Section 170. With all due respect, that is beyond the purview of this board. Administrative agencies and assessors must follow the law as enacted by the legislature, unless that statute has been declared unconstitutional by a court. No court has declared this statute unconstitutional, and therefore this board should follow that statute. The assessors should follow that statute. With regard to the options before us, I believe that option one makes a lot of sense. I would note that at the very end, option one says if there's no relief granted by a county, the taxpayer can go to court. That is true, although the section provides that the first option, if the relief is denied, is the taxpayer, could go to the board. And some taxpayers may prefer to go to the Assessment Appeals Board rather than directly to court. I'm not assuming that the option one is taking that alternative option of going to the Assessment Appeals Board away from the taxpayer, but perhaps is suggesting the taxpayer, if needed be, could go directly to court. I leave that up for this board to determine that. I think option number two is also supportable. I think particularly the second part of it, to seek an executive order from the governor. Obviously, the legislation to amend Section 170, I don't think we need to have it. If that helps, then certainly, by all means, let's support that as well. Option 3 and 4, I think there's a debate about the board's interpretation, and I don't think do nothing is the right thing to do. We have to do something. We have to do something to get this economy back on track so we can all move forward. And so I would support option 1 and option 2. Thank you for the time to speak.
Douglas Moe, Counsel, Evershed Sutherland, LLP. Mr. Moe, are you available? Douglas Moe? If not, we will move forward to Marcy Berkman, Counsel for Santa Clara County Assessment Appeals Board. Ms. Berkman?
Hi, I'm sorry. It took me a while to get off mute. I apologize. Yes, briefly, I litigated the Slocum case, and some of you may have caught the Bloomberg article in which Eric Meskey, who litigated on behalf of the airlines and the board in that case, opined that Slocum was correct and that 170 does not permit mid-year reassessment for disaster relief absent physical damage. And as Slocum was clear, although the focus on that case was 170A3, in footnote 6 and elsewhere, I believe it was page 977, the Slocum court made clear that even 170A1, to the extent it provides access, reduced value for restricted access, would be void as against the law. And the Constitution is easy to follow when times are good. And now more than ever, both in the state and the country, I think it's imperative that we ensure our laws follow the Constitution and that we abide by the Constitution, because that's what everything derives from. And it may be easy in good times, but equally important in hard times. And all of us as lawyers and public officials swore oaths to uphold that Constitution when we began doing our jobs. Today, just an update on SB 1431. The Appropriations Committee of the Senate moved that onto the suspense calendar, so that's just the current status. There's already legislation out there, and I urge this board to do nothing regarding 170, and if industry pushes it, it will eventually wind its way up through the courts, and the Supreme Court will make a decision 8 years from now. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Peter Koskieldoff of California Alliance of Taxpayer Advocates, CATA. Mr. Koskieldoff, are you available? If not, our next speaker is Kitty Calavita. She has a written statement that will be read into record by Mr. Henry Nanjo. Mr. Nanjo, are you available to read her statement?
Yes, I am. Let me find her comment. Excuse me. My comments are not in order.
While you're looking for that comment, Mr. Chairman and board members, we have several written comments that will be read into the record by Mr. Nanjo. So after we hear the written comments, we will go back to the AT&T moderator to ensure that we receive all public comments. Mr. Nanjo, are you ready?
Yes.
Go ahead.
This is from Ms. Kitty Calavita, and her comment is as follows. Disaster relief is meant for natural disasters such as earthquakes that physically damage a building. Please do not allow owners to use COVID-19 to make up for possible economic downturns in value, which can be assessed with other methods. Providing inappropriate disaster relief will cost distressed schools and communities and disproportionately advantage commercial property owners. CARES, capital C-A-R-E-S, already allows owners to write off losses. We need the revenue from commercial property taxes now more than ever, unquote.
Thank you, Mr. Nanjo. The next written comment is from Rachita Raywall. Are you available to read? Do you have that comment available?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Quote, this board should not take any action which will create a loss for cities, counties, and schools. This means full rejection of options listed under working groups 3 and 4 and choosing to do nothing and maintain the status quo. She also has a second written comment. Good morning. My name is Rachita Raywall. I'm a campaign coordinator with Evolve California. We're a grassroots nonprofit based in San Francisco. I'm here to represent our 13,000 members in opposition to all the options listed under working groups 3 and 4. First of all, disaster relief is intended for actual physical damage to buildings. This is just an attempt by commercial property owners to lower values and capitalize on the crisis. Secondly, changing the lien date so properties have to be reassessed right now will just result in us giving these commercial property owners more tax breaks. All these proposals will do is to rob local governments and schools of needed revenue. It is wrong to take funding away from our teachers and students when they are already burdened with having to do more with less. I ask the Board of Equalization to reject all of the options listed under working groups 3 and 4 and instead choose to do nothing and maintain the status quo. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Nanjo. Karen Rorda.
And again, this is a written comment submitted by Karen Rorda. She again has two comments. Quote, for one, allowing disaster relief and decline in value relief and using county resources to do so at this time is utterly outrageous. I will personally do everything I can to make sure this is front page news if it passes. Her second comment is, as a retired homeowner in San Francisco, I asked the committee to vote to do nothing on both working groups 3 and 4. From what I've read, neither of these requests by large corporate property owners meet the legal definition of physical damage as is being considered under Working Group 3 or good assessment practices in changing the lien date and looking at the data during this very short period of downturn as it is being considered under Working Group 4. Nor do either pass the sniff test. Could you actually vote to require local government to cut checks to some of the largest corporations in the world right now? While these proposals and the board's hearing have been sleepers, you can bet a vote of this magnitude will not go unnoticed.
Thank you. The next comment that will be read by Mr. Nanjo is from Elizabeth Vitanza.
Yes. Again, this is from Elizabeth Vitanza. Quote, I am a parent in the Glendale Unified School District, and we have just been notified by our board that we are facing nearly 25% budget cuts next year due to the decline in state revenue due to the pandemic. That our school board would have to figure out how to educate 26,000 students on less than $7,000 per student per year. It is simply not possible. The proposal for disaster relief and decline in value relief is unconscionable. It would essentially rob our children, the future of California, in order to prop up commercial landlords. Declaring properties to be damaged and in need of disaster relief to lower values is nothing but a short-sighted attempt by commercial property owners to capitalize on the crisis. Short-term tax relief is already provided through the income corporation tax automatically when it comes to the incomes drop. CARES provides additional huge relief to commercial property owners by allowing them to write off losses against other income and roll back their losses to get refunds from 2017 taxes. I ask that in your response to Working Group 3, you choose option 4, do nothing, maintain the status quo. For response to Working Group 5, I ask you choose option 5, do nothing, maintain the status quo, unquote.
The next comment that will be read is from Joshua Perlman.
Yes, Joshua Perlman states, quote, I do not think the board should do anything that takes further revenues from schools. For Working Group 3, this is not a disaster creating physical damages, so I think this would be poor stewardship of public funds. Commercial property already benefits from massive tax breaks. Please do nothing. For Working Group 4, please do not vary from your normal schedule to appease these interests who have already benefit disproportionately from Proposition 13. If there is long-lasting value change, it will be incorporated into the next assessment.
The next item read will come from Chris Hohen, H-O-E-N.
Okay, and Working Group M1C-Working Group 3. The BOE should not take any action that would reduce the revenues for schools, cities, and counties at a time when they are already confronting declining revenues, increasing demands in response to COVID-19, and potential cuts in state support. Additional revenue losses will only endanger funding for vital services, most notably schools and the human and social services needed by workers and families harmed by the crisis. Declaring properties to be damaged and in need of disaster relief defies logic and looks more like an attempt by commercial property owners and those that represent them to take advantage of a crisis. In addition, short-term tax relief is already provided through the income and corporation tax when incomes drop, and the federal CARES provides additional and significant relief to commercial property owners by allowing them to write off losses against other income and roll back their losses to get refunds from 2017 taxes. M1D, Working Group 4, here again, the board should not take any action which would reduce revenues for schools, cities, and counties at a time when they're already confronting declining revenues, increasing demands in response to COVID-19, and potential cuts in state support. The call for across-the-board reductions in commercial property values is illogical. A broad lowering of values makes no sense in a world where base year values are already significantly underassessed. It would also be bad assessment practice, as declines in property values will be realized in the next assessment based on better data and information rather than speculative claims.
Thank you, Mr. Nanjo. If we can just have you pause in the comments, we do have Lawrence Stone, Santa Clara County Assessor, on the line. Mr. Stone, are you available to make public comment on Work Group 3? Mr. Stone, AT&T moderator, can you check to see if Mr. Stone is available?
Mr. Stone, if you're on the phone lines, please press 1 then 0, and we'll open up your line.
If not, we will continue with the reading of the comments. Thank you, AT&T moderator. Mr. Nanjo, can you please continue by reading the comment from Sandra Madera, Madera?
Okay. Sandra Madera states, this board should not take any action which will create a loss of revenues for cities, counties, and schools. That means full rejection of the options listed under Working Groups 3 and 4, choosing to do nothing and maintain the status quo. Working Group number 3, comments. Disaster relief is intended for actual physical damage to buildings, which assessors can determine by seeing the actual damage. Economic losses have other ways of being accounted for in future assessments, and commercial property owners just got big income and corporate tax breaks. Choose option 4, do nothing, maintain the status quo. She also has comments to Working Group 4, which I'll pass until we come up on Working Group 4.
Thank you. Our next public comment comes from Vaughn Villaverde, Working Partnerships USA. Mr. Nanjo, do you have that comment ready to read?
Yes, I do.
Thank you.
Working Group 3 comment. On behalf of the Working Partnerships USA, I'm here to urge the State Board of Equalization to reject all the options presented by Working Group 3 and maintain the current status quo. As the state faces unprecedented fiscal challenges brought by the COVID-19 public health emergency, the board should not be considering actions that will reduce funding for schools, which are already facing major budget cuts. Declaring properties to be damaged and in need of disaster relief to lower values is nothing but an attempt by commercial property owners to capitalize on this crisis. Economic losses caused by the pandemic have other ways of being accounted for. At a time when, quite frankly, the state and local governments could use all the revenue it can get to fund life-saving relief and supportive services, the proposals being considered today are not only irresponsible but dangerous. Thank you. And again, I'll pause on the Working Group 4 comment.
I did locate the line of Mr. Stone, by the way.
Thank you.
My pleasure. Mr. Stone, your line is open.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. If you can just announce yourself, sir.
Yes, my name is Larry Stone. I'm the County Assessor of Santa Clara County. And Mr. Chair, I do have new information because SB 1431 was not on a previous agenda. It appears we may have two different versions of SB 1431, depending upon whether amendments by Senators Wiener and Hertzberg have been added. Both versions, however, are unconstitutional. Both will be litigated and both will reach the same outcome as Slocum versus American Airlines. A similar attempt has been mentioned to provide immediate financial relief to the airlines impacted by the 9/11 terrorist attacks. As Marcy Berkman mentioned, prominent corporate attorney Eric Metzke represented the airlines in the Slocum case, and he said to Bloomberg late last month, and I quote, "It is a constitutional problem that cannot be addressed by statute or rule. The Constitution is not a malleable piece of clay that can be molded at will to fit whatever the most political expedient is at the moment. SB 1431, as originally drafted, would provide property tax refunds to commercial property owners retroactive to April 4th, 2020. Already overwhelming a serious $54 billion state budget deficit at the expense of needed revenue for public schools, cities, counties, and other local government, including funding for police, fire, and medical first responders facing personal risk every day as they care for the victims of COVID-19. The second version, including proposed amendments, which have yet to be adopted by the author, is even more convoluted. It limits relief only to multifamily apartments, excluding relief for all commercial property. One of the major arguments that CADA has made in advocating for SB 1431 is in amending Section 170 is that the diminution of value occurs because of restricted access to property caused by COVID-19. The argument does not apply to apartments. No apartment tenant is restricted from accessing their apartment because of COVID-19. The loss of apartment revenue is also not a valid argument. Statistics reflect that apartment rent collections for COVID-19 months of April, May, and now early June are surprisingly high. I can verify that through personal experience. I'm the general partner, co-owner, and developer of 500 units of affordable housing, half in San Francisco, a 257-unit single-resident occupancy, and a 245-unit affordable housing project in San Jose. One would expect that my low-income tenants would be the most vulnerable to financial distress from COVID-19, unable to pay their rent. Well, for the COVID months of April, May, and June, rent collections for the San Francisco SRO projects were 97% in April and May and 85% for the first 8 days of June. Rent collections for the San Jose family project were 98% in April, 100% in May, and 92% for the first 8 days of this month. Occupancy for both properties is near 100%. It would be impossible to make the case that these properties have suffered any reduction in value due to COVID-19. If there's not a reduction in rental income, there's no diminution of value. The property tax system is not the mechanism to provide relief to property owners suffering from a personal financial crisis unrelated to outside property, outside of existing Prop 8 issues. That's the federal and state role. Assessors recognize that businesses are hurting, and thankfully there is a solution. On January 1st, 2021, assessors will proactively provide extensive relief to properties that experience declines below the factored base year value. At the height of the Great Recession, assessors reduced the values on over 3 million properties, and I anticipate we will do it again beginning January 21st, 2021. This is great for assessors, as we will be able at that time to rely on market data, and it is great for property owners needing that help. Please don't knowingly violate the California Constitution. 2 attorneys general's opinions, a BOE legal counsel, and a court case all support that this is unconstitutional. Thank you for your comments, for your time.
Thank you. At this time, we will have a public comment from Peter Kostendorf. I apologize if I mispronounced your name. From CADA, California Alliance of Taxpayers Advocates. Sir, are you available?
Clerk Davis, this is Henry Nancho. I think we need to have the AT&T moderator try to reach him.
Sir, if you're on the line.
Moderator?
Yes, ma'am. Sir, if you're on the line, please press 1, then 0. We'll open up your line.
If he's not available, we'll move forward with the written comments as read by Mr. Nanjo. Dean Jacobson.
Thank you, Clerk Davis. Okay, Dean Jacobson states, the board should not take any action which will create a loss for cities, counties, and schools. That means full rejection of the options listed under working groups 3 and 4, choosing to do nothing and maintain the status quo. Regarding working group number 3, disaster relief is intended for actual physical damage to buildings, which assessors can determine by seeing the actual damage. Economic losses have other ways of being accounted for in future assessments, and commercial property owners just got a big income and corporate tax breaks. Choose option 4, do nothing, maintain the status quo, please. And I'll reserve his comments on work group 4.
Thank you. Can you please read comments from Christina Caraba?
Sure. Christine Caraba writes, this board should not take any action which will create a loss for cities, counties, and schools. That means full rejection of options listed under working groups 3 and 4 and choosing to do nothing and maintain the status quo. Disaster relief is intended for actual damage to actual physical damage to buildings, which assessors can determine by seeing the actual damage. Economic losses have other ways of being accounted for in future assessments, and commercial property owners just got big income and corporate tax breaks.
Thank you. Can you please read the public comments from Veronica Caravazes?
Yes. She writes, this board should not take any action which will create a loss of revenue for cities, counties, and schools. These proposals endanger the very health of the local governments which fund critical essential services upon which we rely so heavily during this pandemic. This will result in an additional loss of revenue for schools that are already facing major budget cuts. I urge you to choose to do nothing and maintain the status quo, and a full rejection of the options listed under working groups 3 and 4. Veronica Cruzales, Policy Director for California Calls.
Thank you. The next public comment read will come from Michael Russo of Advancement Project California.
Michael Russo writes, we urge the board to adopt status quo options 4 and 5 respectively for these two agenda items, and he's referring to work group 3 and 4. For these two, in order to safeguard resources that are critically needed for cities and counties at this time of crisis. Advancement Project is a civil rights organization that works to end racial disparities by transforming public systems. As part of that mission, we perform budget analysis to support advocates, community organizers, and residents from across the state, including the Central Valley and Inland Empire, as they call for equity-based investments in low-income communities of color. In these past few weeks, I've had many conversations with partners worried about the impact of the pandemic and the recession on their local budgets. They're especially concerned on the ability of their communities to provide critical health services, support the homeless, renters, and struggling homeowners as they face housing instability, and provide PPE and other material to public and essential workers. The one piece of good news that I've been able to share in those conversations is while many local revenue sources have declined sharply, property taxes should be relatively stable and provide a key lifeline to cities and counties. The proposals advanced by working groups 3 and 4 would undermine this stability via legally and economically dubious approaches that would harm communities who have been most impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic. There are 3 primary reasons why we urge you to reject these options presented by these 2 working groups. First, and most importantly, these options would both rob localities of resources to support those most in need, while directing the largest dollar value assistance would go to the most valuable properties, owned disproportionately by deep-pocketed corporate entities that are best positioned to weather the recession and who have already received substantial assistance via the CARES Act and other federal action. Second, these proposals would create significant uncertainty when local officials need reliable information and projections to inform their budget making. Because of the unsettled nature of the economy, assessing property values is very challenging right now. Whether or not the fall will bring a second wave of outbreaks will have a significant impact on what economic activity looks like in the second half of the year. For example, the proposed reassessments would require much guesswork, administrative complexity, and a flurry of lawsuits and appeals that would undermine certainty for localities and property owners alike. Further, several of the options identified by Working Group 3 certainly appear to violate our state's constitution, which would trigger still further legal challenges. Finally, these approaches are deeply counterproductive ways of addressing a potential problem that localities are best equipped to handle themselves. Many cities and counties across the state have created spending programs to help renters pay their rent or get grants to small businesses that need help to stay open during the lockdown. Local officials are the ones who have the information and legitimacy to weigh competing needs and determine how to prioritize assistance to property owners given specifics of their community's health needs, economic situation, and fiscal condition. And unlike the revenue losses for these proposals these new programs are reimbursable with federal dollars under the CARES Act, meaning they provide additional resources for California, while these proposals would starve our state. For the foregoing reasons, it is to ensure California mounts an effective and equitable response to the recovery to this crisis, we urge you to reject the proposed options and adopt a status quo approach to both these key issues. Michael Russo, Director, Equity and Community Investments, Advancement Project, California.
Thank you. If we can just check to see once again if Peter Kochkendorf is available from CADA. Moderator, can you just let them know that they can press the necessary buttons to come on?
Sir, if you're on the phone lines, please press 1 then 0. We can open up your line.
If not, we're going to continue with the written comments from Andrea Moeller. Mr. Nanjo?
Yes. Ms. Moeller writes, this board should not take any action which will create a loss of revenues for cities, counties, and schools. That means full rejection of the options listed under Working Groups 3 and 4 and choosing to do nothing and maintain the status quo. Working Group 3 comments. Disaster relief is intended for actual physical damage to buildings, which assessors can determine by seeing the actual damage. Economic losses have other ways of being accounted for in future assessments, and commercial property owners just got big income and corporate tax breaks. Choose option 4. Do nothing, maintain the status quo. And I'll go ahead and hold her comments on for Working Group 4.
And we have located the line of Peter Kochkendorf.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Your line is open.
Hello. Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. If you can just announce yourself.
Okay. This is Peter Kochkendorf representing the California Alliance of Taxpayer Advocates. Thank you for allowing me to stay on the line and working out the technical difficulties. We've seen major revenue losses for landlords, tenants, and businesses alike. Many companies have or are on the verge of failing. As such, CADA is in favor of anything that will assist taxpayers during these very difficult times. Specific to option 1, where the board would issue a letter to assessors encouraging acceptance of claims for mid-year declines, we think it would be positive for the BOE to draft that guidance, assuming it provides clarity and favors relief for taxpayers. Specific to option 2, CADA would support legislation or an executive order that clarifies and removes conflict over Section 170. However, new legislation or an executive order should benefit all those affected and not just a single industry. As for option 3, we would support that as long as the LTA interpreting Section 170 provides relief to taxpayers. And lastly, for option 4, we would only support doing nothing if there were viable solutions providing relief to taxpayers accomplished in Working Group 4. Thank you for your time and allowing me to make comments.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Nanjo, can you please read comments from Michelle DiNardo?
Yes. Ms. DiNardo writes, "This is appalling. These proposals once again favor the wealthy at the expense of the broad majority of citizens. It's shocking that commercial property owners have the gall to suggest these proposals given they already have big tax breaks and bailouts from the federal government." Group 3, these proposals are illogical and will create additional loss of revenue for schools that are already facing major budget cuts, hurting our most vulnerable children and families. Choose option 4, do nothing, maintain the status quo. And again, I'll reserve her comments on group 4.
Thank you. We've received additional comments from Michael LeBeau. Have you received those comments, Mr. Nanjo?
Yes, let me find those. Okay. Let's see. Yes, Michael LeBeau. Comment, I support a short 90-day extension to all assessment appeals deadlines, provided those extensions apply to both government and taxpayers. With the latest news, the LA County Assessment Appeals Boards will have been shut down for exactly 3 months. We as professional tax advisors must recognize the incredible hardship this creates for appeals boards and their clerks and allow them extra time they need to catch up. That same extension should also apply to appeals board application filing deadlines because the local government offices have been closed in-person transactions, and in some cases, taxpayers do not have access to their mail during this crisis. In regards to Section 170 relief, I support CADA's position. Despite the disagreements, we're confronting an invisible contamination that is causing, in many cases, both physical and economic damage. I request that the board adopt both option 1, issuing a letter to assessors encouraging acceptance of claims for mid-year declines in value, and option 2, supporting legislation to amend RTC to further define economic/physical damage and or seek an executive order from the governor.
Thank you. The next public comment we've received is from Robert Nakami. Do you have that available, Mr. Nanjo?
Yes, I do. There it is. His comment is support option 4, do nothing, maintain the status quo.
Thank you. Our next public comment was received from Veronica Carrizales. Do you have that available?
Yes, I do. Working Group 3 comments, disaster relief is intended for actual damage to buildings which assessors can determine by seeing actual damage. Economic losses have other ways of being accounted for in future assessments, and commercial property owners just got big income and corporate tax breaks. Choose option 4, do nothing, maintain status quo. And I'll reserve our comments to Working Group 4.
Thank you. Our next written comment was received, or at least it looks like we have someone who is on the line who'd like to make a statement. Is Steve Cruz of Cruz Strategies on the line? Mr. Cruz, are you available? AT&T moderator, if you can check to see if he's available.
Mr. Cruz, if you're on the phone line, please press 1, then 0. We do have several other people who'd like to make comment over the phone lines.
Perfect, thank you. If he is not available, Mr. Nanjo, if you can just double check to make sure that there was no written comment received from Mr. Cruz.
Let me see. I do not have one from Mr. Cruz, I believe. Yes. No, I do not.
Okay. At this time, we would like to ask Mr. Chairman, we do have several public comments that we have, commenters that are on the line. Would you like for the AT&T moderator to facilitate those conversations?
Yes, if they're on Work Group 3.
Okay, before we go there, if we can have Mr. Doug Moe. I know that you were called earlier. If you can be the first commenter for Work Group 3. Are you available, Mr. Moe?
Excuse me, Madam Clerk, before we go to public comment, I'm not sure if Mr. Gaines was able to make his overview on Senate Bill 1431.
No, we will have his in a minute. Actually, I was trying to do it before,
That's
but
what I
since
thought
we
we
went
were
to
going to
public
do.
comment, I haven't forgot about it though.
Okay, all right. I'm looking forward to that presentation.
If Mr. Gaines is okay with that. Okay,
Okay, thank you.
I haven't forgot about it.
Ms. Davis.
AT&T moderator, can you please check to see if Douglas Moe is available to make a public comment at this time?
Douglas Moe, if you're on the phone lines, please press 1 then 0, and we have located the line for Mr. Cruz as well.
Thank you. If Mr. Moe is not on the line, if we can have Mr. Cruz make his public comment at this time.
We do have Vanessa speaking for Steve Cruz. Vanessa, your line is open.
Thank you. Hi, this is Vanessa Gonzalez on behalf of the City of San Jose. I'd like to associate my comments with those from the Assessor Representative and Mr. Goldberg in rejecting any efforts to change the disaster relief statutes as in SB 1431 or through actions at the BOE to change Section 170. As you are well aware, property taxes are an important source of income to cities, counties, and school districts. Currently, these local governments are on the front lines of responding to the COVID-19 crisis. For the City of San Jose, that includes services such as sheltering, food and necessities distribution, communications, and enforcement. At the same time that the demand for services is going up, we are already facing a $100 million budget shortfall due to declining revenue. Any delay or reduction in commercial property taxes at this critical time will jeopardize the traditional services the cities provide, including police, fire, and emergency services. Therefore, we respectfully urge you to reject these proposals.
Thank you so much. AT&T moderator, we are ready to start accepting public comments.
Okay, and I did locate the line of Doug Moe. One moment, please.
Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Mr. Moe, your line is open.
Thank you. Thank you, board members and Mr. Chairman, for the time. I'm Doug Moe from Evershed, Sutherland. I wanted to address and go back to Mr. Nanjo and Moon when they talked about economic damage from the Attorney General opinions. And I agree with both of them. I agree with the Attorney General opinions. There is no relief under 170 for pure economic damage. But their comments didn't address the restricted access portion of Section 170A1. So I just don't think that their analysis is applicable to the question that the chairman asked about restricted access. Further, with regard to Assessor Gakel, I agree with him as well. Physical damage is required, but as recounted by the chairman in reading the statute, restricted access was determined as a form of physical damage. The other thing that I'd like to point out is in the last call that we had, I did point out that the Slocum decision did have a footnote that explicitly stated that the court was not ruling on the constitutionality of restricted access. And I have not heard a comment to the board, either written or oral, that disputes the fact that Slocum does not apply to Section A1. So there has been no ruling on the constitutionality of the statute. The other thing I pointed out in the last call that hasn't been commented on is that the notion of restricted access has been in the statute, in the predecessor statute to 170, and then in current 170 for 50 years. And there has never been a challenge to the constitutionality of that provision. So in sum, what I'd like to point out to the board is that we, as a taxpayer's representative, I agree that there needs to be physical damage. It is in the Constitution. However, the legislature, in its authority, has interpreted physical damage to be restricted access. And so I think the comments need to be addressed to restricted access. Is that appropriate or not? And I believe that the legislature has spoken and said it is. And I believe that it's the board's duty to enforce the laws written. What I would encourage the board to do would be adopt option one, which would be to issue an LTA that simply states that restricted access is a form of physical damage and that assessors are required to assess whether there has been restricted access and whether that's affected the value of the property. Thank you for your time.
Our next public comment comes, AT&T moderator, are there any other public commenters available at this time?
Yes, ma'am, there are. We'll open up the line number of 52. Line 52, your line is open.
Thank you.
Line 52, your line is open. If your line is muted, we're unable to hear you. And with no response, we'll move on to line 123. Your line is now open.
Hi, Chair, members. Nick Romo on behalf of the League of California Cities today. You've heard a lot of public comment in regards to local revenues and the issues that we're facing. What I would say today for the board members to consider are two things. We know from prominent economists, those who have looked at 2008 and previous recessions, who are looking at this economic recession and global pandemic, that if local governments do not properly recover, then the curve will be much steeper. In regards to adding additional value to this conversation, I would say that from the League of Cities perspective, we certainly see apartment owners and commercial properties as stakeholders in our city. And what we would suggest, and we urge and we consider, that you consider working with the legislature and other stakeholders to find a different way to provide relief to these property owners. We believe that affecting the property tax system, property tax law is inappropriate in this way. But there are other creative ways the Senate leadership and Assembly leadership are looking at, and we encourage you to look at that way in which we can find a win-win in the situation. We can find relief for property owners while keeping some safety measure within the property tax system for local governments through this time. So I just encourage you to look for more creative solutions in this space. We look forward to working with you, and we stand as a partner.
And before we open line number 52, I'd like to remind everyone, if you'd like to provide public comment, please press 1, then 0 at this time. Next, we'll open line number 52. Your line is now open.
Hello, this is Wes Nichols. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, sir. Go ahead.
My name is Wes Nichols. I'm a member of CADA, and my public comment would be this: is as far as a lot of people that showed opposition for calamity relief about the schools, I'm very sympathetic to your concerns, and they're scared. From what my knowledge of and understanding is that if there's any calamity relief, the state backfills it to the county. So whatever the loss of revenue that the county would receive, the state would make up for the difference. So the schools would not be impacted. As far as some of the other issues that they talked about the decline in value for 2020, and I know Mr. Stone is adamant about giving relief for 2021, the issue here is the timeliness of action of all of us here on this call and in this meeting. I know the stock market's gone up and we're starting to reopen and things sound and look great or better than they were, which is all true. However, talking to many of my clients, it's still pretty scary out there. Mortgages aren't being paid, rent's not being received, and they're really scared that they're going to end up losing their commercial properties, which is going to end up losing commercial businesses and have a trickle-down effect. So anything that we can do to make a difference now in the upcoming year is going to be the difference between a mass foreclosure rate or a lower foreclosure rate, but it's coming. And this is not over, and I'm here to make a difference in the world. And I know all of you are too, and this is one way to be able to help taxpayers, tenants, and property owners now rather than wait till 2021. And I do realize that, yeah, there are some big companies out there that don't need the relief and will potentially get it. However, that's probably a very small fraction of maybe 5-10%. I think we really need to look at the bigger picture here, and that's the 80% of small businesses, small restaurant owners, small hotel operators, small office owners, doctors, medical offices that are impacted by this, and they're not part of the 1% or the 5% of large Fortune 500 companies. So I'd like just to keep that in consideration. Thank you.
And next, we'll open line number 113. Please remember to provide your name and affiliation if applicable. Your line is open, line 113.
Good afternoon, honorable members of the board. My name is Robert Nakamai, and I am a Deputy County Counsel with the County of Santa Clara. I have represented our county assessors since 2006. I support option 4 on your published agenda, do nothing, maintain status quo. The law starts with the California Constitution. The legislature's power to tax property in California is constitutionally derived. For reassessments due to misfortune or calamity, Article 13, Section 15 of the Constitution requires physical damage. I urge you to adopt option 4. Thank you.
And at this time, we have no one else in queue for public comment. Please continue.
Members, let me go back to Member Gaines. He was listed actually to go on before, and I got a little sidetracked. So let me go back to Member Gaines to talk about SB 1431, because I know there's been some updates on that and amendments. If you can give us the little report.
Thank you, Chair Vasquez. Just wanted to take this opportunity also to thank Mark Durham, Glenna Schultz, and Ronel Duarca, who helped put the analyses together on both of these bills. But in summary, Senate Bill 1431 regards the disaster property tax relief provisions that provide that damage include the diminution in the value of property as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. And they define damage as expressly providing that damage include restricted access to property caused by any law, order, rule, regulation of the state or any city, county, or other political subdivision providing tenant protections in response to the COVID-19 pandemic, including but not limited to eviction controls imposed by Executive Order number N3320 on March 19th of this year, and also Executive Order N3720 issued on March 27th of this year. And as you've heard by previous speakers, the bill was moving through and was heard today in the Appropriations Committee. It's been put on suspense, and typically, as a Republican, that's where bills would go to die. So I'm just telling you, I had a lot of bills in the Senate that never got out of appropriations, and that was the joke in the Senate. But you also have to remember that this bill is being carried by a Democrat with proposed amendments coming from both Senator Wiener and Senator Hertzberg, who have a lot of influence within the Senate. So it could move forward. I think my advice is that we continue to keep an eye on this. I do want to thank Senator Glazer for looking out for taxpayers. There's a lot of people that are struggling in this pandemic, and it's kind of at all levels in terms of the economics. My son buys cars for a dealership, and he's been furloughed for almost 3 months now. I have a constituent in part of my district who's a dentist, and the protocols to start back up as a result of new requirements from the dental board was going to cost him about $100,000 to start his dental practice back up. So he's talking about retiring. But let's also remember about all the people that were just on the edge, people that were running businesses, and they were making enough money to survive. But when something like a pandemic hits and you don't have access to your property and it's prolonged for a long period of time, you know, can you really start that business back up? And I do realize that there's been relief provided through some of the federal legislation, but that's not across the board. It's not. It hasn't impacted everybody. So I'm sympathetic to the challenges of taxpayers. My recommendation is that we continue to track the Glazer bill and see if is it really dead or does it resurrect with amendments. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, this is now before us.
So just real quick, Member Gaines, your recommendation is just a track. Is that in the form of a motion to continue the item, or
the assessor option to do that?
Thank you, and I appreciate the question, but my recommendation is that I don't think we need a motion. My thought was let's continue to watch it as it progresses, and if it moves to another committee and is still alive, then I think we can make a decision at that point as to whether we want to weigh in or not.
Okay. Mr. Chair, I'd like
Yes, go ahead, Ms. Cohen.
Probably just go on record and share some of my thoughts that I'm thinking as I've heard and listened to the public comment. It's apparent that there's a controversy concerning the interpretation of the revenue tax and the revenue tax code section 107 regarding whether damage is required. I still believe that an attorney general opinion can provide guidance in this matter. However, the legislature through Senate Bill 1431 has entered into the fray now. As Senator Gaines has mentioned, there are extensive amendments that were discussed today. I also agree that it's premature for the board to consider acting on a bill that is expected to be amended. Of course, further amendments could change the character of this legislation. We also need to very carefully factor in the positions taken by county assessors and representatives of the city and counties, such as the League of California Cities, as well as CSAC. Part of our responsibility as elected officials is to first do no harm. And so taking action now regarding the reinterpretations of Revenue Tax Code Section 170, while Senate Bill 1431 is still before the legislature, I think, before the legislature with anticipated amendments. And while we don't have independent guidance of any new attorney general's opinion, I would, as I stated earlier, I think it's premature, and I agree with Senator Gaines. I believe that our best course of action is to not take away best course of action is not to take any action of reinterpreting the Revenue Tax Code or any action expressing an opinion on Senate Bill 1431.
I agree with you. Oh, I'm sorry. Is it Mr. Vice Chair Schaefer? Did you want to make a comment?
Yes, Chair Vasquez, I can count noses, and I know the most popular alternative tends to be option 4, but I think we have a great need for option 1 now because people are suffering, and I would move that we adopt option 1, issue a letter to assessors encouraging acceptance of claims for mid-year declines in value due to COVID-19 pandemic, and if it's denied, the taxpayers are free to go to court. That's my motion.
Well, I'd like to just say the freedom to go to court is relative. Not everybody has that freedom. Not everybody can enjoy the resources to hire an attorney to go through the legal proceedings, particularly during a difficult time if they're running a business or if their families are.
Ms. Cohen, they go to court for small claims for as little as $30 for up to $1,500, and I think the jurisdiction is many times that, and they're all without attorneys. In fact, attorneys are forbidden. We're not talking about major companies that have a corporate counsel. We're talking about people that own ma and pa apartment houses and things like that, where their loss is in small claims jurisdiction.
All right, well, Mr. Chair, I'd like to just go on the record that I'm in disagreement with the proposal and the motion that Mr. Schaefer is putting forward.
Thank you. Well, if there's no second, it pretty much dies.
Right.
And while I respect, and especially listening to both sides, especially of the public, excuse me, earlier today, I do also agree with my colleague, or at least a couple of my colleagues here, that I think it is a little premature right now to take any action, but to continue to follow this closely. And we are regrouping on the 23rd, so should something happen in the next couple of weeks, well, I think we'll have an opportunity to revisit this. But if I don't hear any other objections or comments, well, I'm sorry, Ms. Kelly?
One more comment, and this is actually directed to Senator Gaines. This is in reference to what Assessor Stone said. Assessor Stone alluded in his testimony that there was some language for the amendments, and I believe he referenced Senator Weiner and Senator Hertzberg. I wanted to ask Senator Gaines if he knew of any specific language or could describe what the Senate is thinking or discussing, if you know at all. I don't know if you do, Mr. Gaines.
No, I would only be speculating. Okay. I know that Senator Weiner has taken the lead in affordable housing related issues. Mm-hmm. He presented a very big bill a couple of years ago, so I think he would have a keen interest in Senator Glazier's bill. But I can only speculate. But I think that I've seen, I can speak to history, that I've seen a number of bills that did move out of suspense if there was support by colleagues, especially in the majority party in the Senate.
Mr. Chairman, may I speak?
Yes, go ahead, Ms. Towers.
I listened to the first hearing on SB 1431, and they talked about some of the amendments, and one was to limit the scope, because the way it was written, it appears to be for all real property, and the goal was to limit it to residential rental property. Also, there was a question about the property owners benefiting from various proposals. The Senate Democrats have a proposal that they're working on to provide some type of relief due to COVID-19 and property owners, so they wanted the amendment to be clear that they basically could not double dip. Mm-hmm. But as of today, the amendments have not, I just checked, the amendments haven't been placed into print. So I tend to agree with Senator Gaines, Member Gaines, that right now it's premature to take a vote on supporting the bill or not supporting the bill, but just to continue to monitor the bill to see what comes out in the near future.
Vice Chair Schaefer, I think you want to speak. You need to turn your mic on, though.
Yes, thank you, Chair Vasquez. I just wanted to mention to Member Cohen that I don't in any way take away from the right of all taxpayers to go to the Assessment Appeals Board process. You know, if they're unhappy, that's always something we protect. Thank you.
Thank you.
Question, if I could.
Yes, go ahead, Mr. Gaines.
Yeah, maker of the motion. If I could just get some clarity on option one. Member Schaefer, I'm reading it. It says, issue an LTA encouraging acceptance of claims for mid-year declines in value due to COVID-19 pandemic. If denied, taxpayers may go to court. So you're recommending an LTA, so it's sending out a letter to the assessors. And so would they then have the authority in each of their counties to do as they saw fit?
Yes, of course.
Okay. So if a particular county had more challenges economically than another, they could act, and if they didn't, they wouldn't have to respond.
Right. And the taxpayer has every right to disagree and pursue it after that if they need to.
Okay. I'll second that motion.
Thank you.
All right, so now we have a motion and it's been seconded.
I have more comments.
Yes, Ms. Towers, go ahead.
Thank you. Not saying I agree or disagree with the motion, but I'm just curious, if we were to issue an LTA, do you vision, or maybe BOE staff can comment on whether or not some type of relief will be provided to the property owners, how long it would take for any kind of relief to be granted? You know, some kind of time frame, because we are in an urgent state. I don't know if we can get any relief to them in 6 months, or would it be 18 months?
The staff available?
Yes, hello, this is David Young, Deputy Director of the Property Tax Department. If I may just thank you, Board, for allowing me to comment on this issue. I think if I'm not mistaken, how option 1 is written is that we issue an LTA encouraging acceptance of claims for mid-year declines in value due to COVID-19 pandemic. My read of it is that right now, as it stands, there is nothing preventing somebody from filing a claim for disaster relief. It has always been the purview of the assessor to evaluate that claim and to see if there is indeed any damage or lowering of the value. That is the assessor's purview and job to do. So I think there is nothing in option 1 that would move it forward the taxpayer already have the ability to file such a claim. The assessor already is charged with reviewing it. If that is an option that you guys, that the board chooses to make and pass, then staff will work with legal and in drafting a letter. But I believe Mr. Moon and Mr. Nanjel already spoke on the applicability of 170 and physical damage. So we will have to work that portion of it out. And as to how long it would actually take the assessors to process the claim and to provide relief for the taxpayer, that would depend on each individual county. Some assessors, some counties processes very quickly, and some, depending on the number of claims filed and the difficulty in determining damage and staffing, may take a little bit longer. So I would have to defer that question to the assessors themselves as to how long it would take if such claims were filed and reviewed.
Chairman Vasquez, this is Richard Moon from the legal department. If I could provide just a couple points of clarification.
Sure, go ahead, Mr. Moon.
The first thing that I'd like to say is option 1 is phrased, the second clause of it, if denied, taxpayers may go to court. I just wanted to clarify that they would first be required to go to the Assessment Appeals Board and seek an AAB decision. And if they were to lose there, then their recourse would then be to file with the Superior Court and not Small Claims Court. If they wanted to challenge an AAB decision. But they are required to first file a claim for reassessment with the AAB in order to exhaust their administrative remedies, or they will not be able to pursue their claim any further.
Chair Vasquez,
Go ahead, Vice Chair.
Yes, I thank him for that comment. I overlooked that they do have to go to the Superior Court and they do have to go to the Appeals Board first. I'd like to point out that the letter to assessors are for guidance only. The assessors are all independently elected officials and have the final say. We just issue the LTA as a guidance to let them know that we have their back on this issue, and it's not mandatory. And of course, we all know that. Thank you.
You know, my thoughts now listening to the discussion on both sides, what if we amended it a little bit so it would we would say that we would create an LTA working with the assessors and to give guidance to the board on the current interpretation of 170 and how it applies to COVID-19 to get some relief?
Well, if there's no clarity on what constitutes damage, how would anyone have relief?
That's my question. That's where I'm a little.
Right.
That's where I'm at. I'm with you on that. I'm just trying to. I thought maybe if we allow really the assessors to work with us a little bit on this to see if it makes sense to put out an LTA, really.
So how do you provide relief under this discrepancy? I mean, like, for what reason are we not seeking the Attorney General's an opinion or clarity on this discrepancy?
Yeah, I agree with you.
I mean, to me, Senator Gaines's first proposal was probably the most reasonable one, meaning that let's just take a wait and see position. And then I added my voice saying, well, let's take a wait and see position and then see if we can get an opinion from the Attorney General. The way I see it is that the more information you have, the more informed of a decision that you can make.
Agree.
Thank you.
Ms. Towers, go ahead.
Thank you. Going back to your comment about maybe working with the assessors with an LTA and guidance in the board's interpretation, I just want to remind all the members that we do have the memo from Chief Counsel that is still attorney-client privilege, so I'm hesitant to speak about it, but it pretty much at least lays out our Chief Counsel's position on this issue. And the county assessors
AT&T operator.
Communications glitch
is now joining.
Did you guys hear me?
Yes, continue.
Okay, thank you. And then our county assessors and their association, they have already provided their opinion that you have to have physical damage to get relief. So with those two in mind, I don't know if trying to go back to the discussion table is going to move us any further. I think we probably should be going back. Now, I realize we have a motion, but going back to Senator Gaines' original recommendation is just to follow Senate Bill 1431 and see what happens.
If I could clarify, I was asked to speak on the bill.
Yes, go ahead.
That's what I did, and I know that's one of the recommendations also. But in terms of the bill itself, I think we wait and see because that's going through an amendment process. But reflecting on option one, I think that is a direct opportunity to help taxpayers that are in a tough position. And I think, we had a lot of public testimony on this Revenue Tax Code 170, Section A1. And that apparently does address restricted access. So
is now exiting.
I think that from a legal standpoint, that hasn't been tested in the court because it was addressing A2, not A1 of Section 170.
Senator Gaines and members, I just got notified that AT&T just got cut off Teams. So if we can just take a 5-minute break, because I don't think the public is listening to us right now.
We have reestablished the line.
Oh, it looks like they reestablished it. All right, we're good. I'm sorry, Mr. Gaines, if you want to continue.
Yes, I was just clarifying that my initial comments were on the bill itself because I was asked to comment on the bill. And I do recommend that we don't take a position on that. We see what happens. It could come out of suspense. There could be amendments and it could be a drastically different bill. With regards to option one, after questions of inquiry that I had made to Member Schaefer, I think it is a pathway because, and I think it could stand legally because if you look at the Revenue Tax Code 170, it was clarified in the testimony that we heard that addressed Section A2, not Section A1, and apparently A1 talks about restricted access. Thank you.
Thank you.
Chairman Vasquez, this is Richard Moon from the legal department again. I think I got cut off before I was able to ask for a final clarification. May I do that now?
Sure, go ahead.
So it's a little bit unclear when we're discussing option one if it's the board suggesting that an LTA be issued, that the assessors just need to take and decide the application, which they can do now, versus whether the board is suggesting that an LTA be issued, that 170 mid-year relief is actually available, which from staff's perspective would be problematic. and any of the technical details or responses to any of the public comments, I'd be happy to undertake. But we would appreciate a clarification as to exactly what the LTA is intending. You're intending the LTA to say. Thank you.
And this is Henry Nanjo, Chief Counsel. To add into what Richard Moon was saying, as the board requested, we provided a Chief Counsel opinion on 170, and I just as a matter of guidance and correction, Member Gaines, there's testimony both ways. Some of the commenters thought that Slocum only related to A2, whereas both your legal department and other commenters have taken the position that the court was clear that physical damage was required, whether it was under A1 or A2. And I believe Ms. Berkman was one of the attorneys on that case and made that comment. So,
Chair Vasquez.
Yeah, go ahead, Vice Chair.
I'd like to amend my motion to strike that last paragraph. If denied, taxpayers may go to court. I don't think that's necessary. So my motion would be to issue a letter to assessors encouraging acceptance of claims for mid-year declines in value due to COVID-19 pandemic, period.
I would second that revision.
All right, so we have the motion that's been revised and it's been seconded. Member Cohen, did I see a hand up?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to say that we clearly have heard from the assessors that they have a certain interpretation of Section 170 that would not result in relief to taxpayers under these circumstances. So how do we, I just want to challenge the assumption that we're going to be giving relief to taxpayers when we have heard from the assessors, who directly works with taxpayers, that there may not be that there wouldn't result in a relief to the taxpayers. So how do we expect taxpayers to get relief even if we issue an LTA? Even if we issue an LTA, how do these taxpayers get their relief? I mean, just thoughtful questions that I'm putting out there on the record.
Do we have a response from either, I guess, the motion maker or the seconder?
Or more importantly, I mean, our general counsel has has made it very clear. He just restated, for the record, his findings. You heard from Richard Moon as well. I just think that this is not a good idea. Taxpayers, yeah, they deserve relief, but I don't know if else they can do it.
Vice Chair Schaefer, I think you want to weigh in, but I think you need to unmute yourself.
Yeah, I think we need to be prudent.
Vice Chair, I think you're muted.
Yes, we're just
go ahead.
Offering a little guidance, and more literature, more information may come forward, to help the assessor and the taxpayer work it out. It's just that I think it's important that our guidance is that we favor encouraging acceptance of claims for people that have mid-year declines, and let the taxpayers know that to be pleased with what the county assessors are doing, and we want the county assessors to favor the taxpayers. I mean, that's what we're elected to do, is to protect the taxpayers.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, who's this?
I understand this is before the board, but this is Don Gakel, President of the California. There's a lot of discussion here, about assessors. Clearly, the Assessors Association is on record as opposing mid-year relief under these guidelines. The association believes that the court in Slocum clearly supported the concept of physical damage. It's certainly required in the Constitution, and certainly that's the position of board counsel. And so I think that, from my perspective, that in an attempt to, provide some sort of relief, you're really offering a false promise to taxpayers by going ahead with this motion. That's my comment. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other comments or questions before we move on to the vote? Hearing none, then let's go ahead and get a roll call vote. Ms. Davis?
Chairman Vasquez,
No.
Vice Chair Schaefer,
Yeah, affirmative.
Member Gaines,
Aye.
Member Cohen,
No.
Deputy Controller Stowers,
No.
All right, so that fails. Are we pretty good about just putting, at least, I guess, monitoring and staying on top of this and waiting, I guess, for any new or further information, especially analysis that'll probably be coming out soon and amendments to SB 1431?
Yes, Mr. Chair and colleagues, I totally believe that the best course of action is to recommend that we do nothing and allow ourselves an opportunity to revisit this issue later.
I agree.
Thank you.
Thank you. And just for the two members that were pushing this issue, I agree with you. I think we need to come up with some form. I just don't feel we have the tools at this point, or really the mechanism to provide that relief just yet. I know it's going to happen eventually, and I just think it's a little premature at this point. But I am definitely open to revisit this.
Thank you, Chair Vasquez.
With that, let's move on to work group 4.
Mr. Chairman, would you like to take a 5-minute break
Sure.
or a 10-minute break?
I was hearing from others that I think they need a 5-minute break, and it's, what do we have here? I have 122, so we're looking at 127. Come back.
Members, if you can remember to please mute your mic.
So mute your mic, and we'll be right back in 5 minutes.
Thank you.
Thank you.